Chapter 470. However, the possibility of that happening was quite small. After calculating the time it would take for reinforcements to arrive, Xiaoqing was relieved. If she moved faster, it would be safer. Then, Xiaoqing left the person who led the way and sneaked into the base. The base had a total of 3 floors, 2 on the surface and 1 underground. She wanted to kill the entire base without causing panic and leaking the news. If reinforcements came, she could only assassinate them in the early stages. After killing most of the important people, she would deal with those who did not have intelligence or had lower intelligence. Xiaoqing had a good plan. The moment she entered the base, she took out Qiu Tang and pinned it to her waist. The fragrance of Qiu Tang was very faint. Ordinary people would not notice it. It could silently lose its ability to move. It was a great help in assassination. Xiaoqing first went to the 2nd floor. The 2nd floor was the office building. All the higher-ups of the base were on the 2nd floor. If she wanted to eliminate future troubles, she would not only have to kill all the modified people, but also the researchers and higher-ups. She would destroy all the information so that this evil research could never be seen again. Actually, she was also worried that when Full Moon Whitewater came to power, he would restart this evil research. Therefore, it was safer to destroy the entire base. As long as the entire research base was destroyed, Full Moon Whitewater would not be able to restart this transformation project in a short period of time. Xiaoqing quickly sneaked into the first office. There were people in the office. It was a bald middle-aged man and a beautiful woman. The two of them were doing something that could not be described. Xiaoqing glanced at a certain part of the middle-aged man. Then, she had to admit that some rumors were quite true. For example, Japanese men were generally cough cough. She crouched on the roof beam with a dagger in her mouth. She lovingly waited for the two of them to finish before she quietly released Qiu Tang. Once Qiu Tang's scent made their entire bodies weak, Xiaoqing ended their lives. She then put the pair of lovebirds back in the same position they were in before she left. This way, if someone came over, they might look at the window and feel that they should not be disturbed, so they left. She was too quick-witted. Xiaoqing patrolled the 2nd floor. Whenever someone was alone in the office or there were not many people in the office, she would immediately use the Qiu Tang, which was even more effective than the knockout incense. Then, he decisively killed them. After passing through several rooms, Xiaoqing rubbed his chin and counted the number of people he had killed. Then, he returned to the 1st floor. Not only were there many staff members on the 1st floor, there were also girls posing for selfies. As long as she killed a person, she would immediately put that person in a position that would not be easily suspected, such as lying down to sleep or talking about love. Of course, the most important thing was that after killing everyone, she had to find the stairs or elevator to the basement. The key points were all in the basement. Starting from the 1st floor, she also began to encounter modified people. These modified people were all very ugly. They were already quite ugly, but when they were modified, their good-looking parts were removed, so they were even uglier. For example, she had seen modified people like this. Their entire right hand was replaced by a machine, and half of their face was rotten. Modified people were not easy to deal with. The Qiu Tang was ineffective against them. If she used real guns and bullets, she would be discovered if she made too much noise. When the time came, she would be surrounded once the alarm went out. The feeling of being surrounded was not good at all. It was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. Even a random punch could kill an old master. Therefore, at the beginning, she avoided them. When she found modified people, she would take a detour and kill the normal people first. Slowly, she realized that these modified people appeared in a pattern. These modified people seemed to be divided into small groups, patrolling around in groups. Xiaoqing was like Spider-Man. She hung on the ceiling and counted. There were 6 modified people in a group, and about 10 minutes later, there would be a group of modified people patrolling below. It was too crowded and not easy to deal with. She had to kill 6 modified people within 10 minutes, and she could not make a sound. This was simply too difficult. It was an impossible task, okay? Xiaoqing had a terrible headache. Then, accidents always came so suddenly. She was thinking about how to deal with these groups of modified people. Suddenly, in a group of modified people, the one at the end of the group stopped and looked around in confusion. Finally, he raised his head. Xiaoqing secretly exclaimed. Then, she fell from the sky like a weight, smashing down with a thud. Then, she smashed right on the head of the modified person. When she fell, the vines had already spread out and wrapped around the 6 of them at the fastest speed. When they wrapped around them, the first thing they bound was their mouths. No matter what, the most important thing was to not let them make a sound. Then, Xiaoqing quickly ended the life of the modified person at the end of the group. For safety reasons, she directly twisted the head of this modified person. As she expected, the remaining 5 people started to struggle. She did not have the ability to kill all of them in one go, so naturally, she made a sound. She could even hear the sound of footsteps coming over. After Xiaoqing finished off the 5 modified people at the fastest speed, she quickly opened the window, hung herself out of the window, and closed the window again. Soon, the sound of footsteps came closer. Someone discovered the corpse on the ground and sounded the alarm. After a while, someone came over. That person said angrily, "Someone sneaked into the base, and you only found out now. A bunch of useless people. Hurry up and check around. The rest of you, follow me and search around. You must find that person." Soon, the sound of footsteps faded away. Xiaoqing did not go back through the window. Although the most dangerous place was the safest place, she still had other things to do. Xiaoqing climbed up to the 2nd floor, found an open window, and went in. She didn't know if she was lucky or not, but the place she went in happened to be the place where she killed the first pair of adulterers. The moment she went in, she heard someone knocking on the door. She quickly hid behind the curtains and cursed her bad luck. It was bad enough that she found this house randomly, but there were still people coming over. She hid behind the curtains. If they forced the door open later, she would have no choice but to do so. Fortunately, luck was still on her side. Xiaoqing suddenly heard a voice outside the door. "Damn, they are actually doing something in broad daylight. Forget it, forget it. Go to the next room. Don't disturb them. They will make things difficult for us." Chapter 471. After successfully dodging the attack, Xiaoqing crawled out from under the table. She sighed and glanced at the man and woman lying on the table. Then, she was blinded by the fat on the man's body. She covered her face and quietly crawled out. After being discovered, she had to be more careful with her actions. Otherwise, she would be inhumanely besieged. At that time, she would not be here to wipe out this base of androids. She would be here to deliver her life. She quietly planted daughter seeds all over the corridor. As long as someone passed by, the daughter seeds would be on their body. She could not rashly let the daughter seeds enter the bodies of those people, because it would be easy for them to be discovered. The daughter seeds stayed on the surface of their bodies and did not move at all. If there was a direct confrontation, they would grow out quickly like parasitic spores and interfere with the host. At the same time, Xiaoqing did a second, more evil thing. She took out the pollen of the chiotong and soaked it in water. Then, she soaked the daughter seeds in the water as well. In other words, the daughter seeds all carried the poison of the Chutang. Although they were diluted with water, once someone was infected, they would slowly become powerless. This kind of powerlessness could not be felt during normal times, but when they were in a battle, they would realize that something was wrong. It could be said that Xiaoqing was extremely evil. After all, she was fighting a group of people alone. She had to be a little evil. After arranging everything, she began the massacre. This time, it was a head-on massacre. As long as she found a patrol team that was alone, she would immediately attack and kill them. A patrol team of no more than 10 people was no different from delivering food to her. The average strength of those androids was above level 3, but what about Xiaoqing? She was only one step away from level 6. Killing a few level 3 and level 4 androids was not a problem at all. Even if these androids could not feel pain or fatigue because their bodies had been modified, it was useless. Because she could kill them in an instant. Gradually, the people in the base of the androids realized that something was wrong. Some of the teams of androids that went out to patrol never returned. And it was not just 1 or 2 teams, but several teams of androids that had disappeared. And their numbers were increasing. The higher-ups immediately ordered the 2 modified teams to merge into one. Once they discovered any abnormalities, they were to report it immediately. Then, they discovered that many of the higher-ups had died in their rooms. An inexplicable panic spread throughout the base. They didn't know how many people had infiltrated the base, nor did they know what the other party's goal was. They only knew that their own people were dying. However, it was not convenient for them to request for help when they were not sure how many intruders there were. What if they requested help only to find out that there were only a few intruders? Wouldn't that be a slap in the face? It was only when nearly half of the cyborgs had mysteriously disappeared that the higher-ups finally couldn't help but send out a distress signal. As soon as she saw the distress signal, Xiaoqing immediately jumped up. She had to get rid of this group of people as soon as possible and then quickly retreat. Otherwise, she would be surrounded like a dumpling. At this point, there was no need for her to hide anymore. She directly found a combined team of androids. The moment the battle began, she released Guangguang. Guangguang grew very luxuriantly. It was as tall as a 2-story building. As soon as it was released, it quickly took root and pierced through the floor. Its tentacles even extended to the first floor. Its crown also broke through the ceiling. The dense branches extended in all directions with an indescribable arrogance. Chapter 472. Anyone who was enveloped by the light, be it a normal person or a modified human, would be slowed down and fall into an illusion. Although the slow movement and the illusion would only last for a short period of time and they would soon wake up, this short period of time was enough. The vines in Xiaoqing's hands quickly broke their necks. Those who were lucky enough to escape were also killed by Xiaoqing's knife and vines. More than a dozen cyborgs, under Xiaoqing's unreserved attacks, only lasted for less than a minute. The light was too big. Countless people rushed towards it. Xiaoqing stood under the tree, unmoving like a mountain. She was prepared to take on the entire base alone. Some people came faster and died earlier. They had just arrived in front of Xiaoqing and had not activated their abilities when small vines suddenly grew out of their bodies. The roots of the daughter quickly pierced into their flesh, carrying the poison of the autumn flowers. Then, Xiaoqing made her move. When the higher-ups of the cyborgs' base led the strongest team of cyborgs over, they only saw a tall tree, a beautiful woman standing under the tree, and corpses lying on the ground. The densely packed corpses made their scalps tingle. They had considered how many intruders there were, but they had never thought that there was only one. A woman. She stood on the spot and killed countless cyborgs. If someone had told them that someone had such an ability, they would have laughed at that person without reservation. How was that possible? How was that possible? Unless the other party was a god. But now, the truth was in front of them. Xiaoqing pretentiously lit a cigarette and held it in her mouth. She looked at the people who were rushing over with a melancholy aura. Then, she stretched out her hand. The vines clustered around her like living creatures. As soon as the battle began, they would quickly fly out to find their prey, tie them up, and pierce their skin with their thorns to inject venom into their bodies. Instead of saying that they were a bunch of vines, they were more like poisonous snakes in the plant world. The thorns were their fangs. The cyborgs that came this time were obviously stronger than the previous ones. At most, it would take Xiaoqing a little more effort to deal with them. There was nothing else. Xiaoqing commanded the little vines to kill the modified humans one after another. Her eyes were filled with pity. She really didn't know why there were people in this world who were willing to become modified humans who didn't feel any pain and didn't even have feelings. While she was struggling to find a way to turn back into a normal person, some people were willing to accept the transformation. Was strength really that important? Perhaps the ambition of those in power was more important. After killing a bunch of androids, Xiaoqing was a little dissatisfied. She took the initiative to go to the first floor. She started from the second floor and searched every room openly, trying not to leave anyone alive. After walking through the second floor, she went to the first floor. After walking through the first floor, she went underground. The underground of the base was a laboratory. There were many half-finished products lying on the operating table. Xiaoqing had to admit that it was disgusting. It was only when she arrived at the laboratory that she found out how the so-called modified humans were created. It was similar to the zombified mutants created by the demonic mercenary group. At least in principle, it was similar. They injected a very special drug into people who had been bitten but had not turned into zombies. It would allow their bodies to maintain a certain level of rationality during the process of zombification. This level of rationality was very low, equivalent to a child of a few years old. Then, another drug was used to control them. Chapter 473. Of course, it was hard to find people who had been bitten but hadn't turned into zombies. They caught ordinary people and let zombies bite them, then carried out the so-called transformation. As for the transformed people with superpowers, they were a little stronger than zombies because they were more rational. There were two kinds of transformed people with superpowers. One was to replace their limbs with machines, and the other was to transform them into zombies. The researchers in the base found that the reason why superpowered people couldn't be infected by zombies was that their cells had been mutated, and ordinary people were different. Once they were bitten or scratched by zombies, the infected cells would automatically necrotize and be expelled from the body. Therefore, superpowered people couldn't be infected. Therefore, they thought of another way, which was to let zombies infect ordinary people, then extract the infected cells from the ordinary people's bodies, and finally implant them into the bodies of superpowered people. The facts told them that this method could indeed infect superpowered people, and it would also retain some of the superpowered people's consciousness. At least, the superpowered people's fighting instincts could be preserved, as well as some judgment and cognition. The transformed superpowered people's fighting strength would be much higher than ordinary superpowered people. These were all discovered by Xiaoqing after going through the information stored in the base. While she was killing the androids, she was also searching for the research materials in the base. When the time came, she would destroy all the information. However, after getting the information, Xiaoqing changed her mind. She found that these people had taken her discovery to the wrong path. What if she changed her mind? For example, if she studied the cells of superpowered people and figured out why they were different, could she invent a drug to resist the zombie poison? Although Xiaoqing was now standing on the opposite side of human beings because of what happened before, she still hoped that such a drug could be invented. When she went back, she could give the information to old Master Qin. She hoped it would be useful. After putting all the information into her space, Xiaoqing was like a barbaric bandit. She directly turned on the mode of killing without caring about burying, killing wherever she went. Those who blocked her way. Kill those who ran away. Catch up and kill those who formed a group to kill her. Kill him. In the beginning, the higher-ups of the base were still organizing people to try and kill Xiaoqing. Later on, they only cared about hiding their heads and running away. Then, they sent the cyborgs to their deaths to buy time and wait for reinforcements. However, no one could stop Xiaoqing's footsteps, not even for a moment. The higher-ups were dumbfounded. The base chief was more decisive. He gritted his teeth and ordered his subordinates, "Release 17396." His subordinate was dumbfounded. "But sir, number 17396 is only a half-finished product." The reason why it was said to be a semi-finished product was not because the modification had not been completed, but because it had not been implanted with something to control it. If it was released, no one knew what would happen. If it went crazy, even if the intruder was killed, they wouldn't be able to control 17396. The best result would be a lose-lose situation. "Didn't you hear? I said release it." The base chief gritted his teeth. His veins were bulging. The most important thing now was to kill this intruder. After the intruder was killed, reinforcements would arrive. By then, they would definitely be able to take down number 17396. His plan was very good. The other two hurriedly agreed and hurried to the deepest part of the base. Soon, an angry roar was heard. This roar reverberated throughout the entire base. Even Xiaoqing heard it. She stopped in her tracks and pricked up her ears to listen carefully. Could it be that this group of people was going to use their ultimate move? She listened carefully for a while but didn't find anything wrong. She didn't even hear the sound of someone approaching. She continued walking forward. After walking for a while, a group of people stumbled over. The leader was a human. He should be one of the higher-ups of the base. There were also a few people who were covered in blood and looked particularly miserable. That wasn't the main point. The main point was that the thing at the back was probably once a human. The reason why she said that it was probably once a human was because it didn't look like a human at all. Its huge body was like a giant gorilla. The surface of its bulging muscles was covered with a network of green blood vessels. There were traces of stitches around its waist. Its lower body looked like some kind of ape-like beast. One of its eyes had been dug out and replaced with an electronic eyeball. Its face was also densely covered with blood vessels. It could be vaguely seen that it used to be a very handsome man. Chapter 474. It probably still had some rationality. At the very least, it could tell who was the enemy. After glancing at Xiaoqing, it pounced on the higher-ups of the base who were protected by the cyborgs. Flesh and blood flew everywhere. All the cyborgs who tried to stop it were torn apart alive. Xiaoqing even felt that she didn't need to do anything anymore. Xiaoqing took a step back. After absorbing the fresh blood, the tree became even more lush. She calmly used her vines to pull back the people who tried to escape. The cyborgs that stood out from the rest roared. Its voice was filled with gratitude. Then, it tore everyone into pieces and stepped on them. In the end, only a pile of meat was left. In the tunnel, countless daughter quietly took root and sprouted, searching for traces of the living. After confirming that no one was still alive, Xiaoqing prepared to leave. As for the cyborgs in front of her, it had nothing to do with her. Just as Xiaoqing was about to leave, the huge cyborgs suddenly collapsed. At this moment, Xiaoqing realized that its back was full of holes. It seemed that many tubes had been inserted into it. Dark red blood kept seeping out of the holes. It fell to the ground and panted. When it raised its head to look at Xiaoqing, its eyes were full of pleading. However, it had lost the ability to speak and couldn't express its pleading. Xiaoqing stopped in front of it and looked at it struggling to gesture. In the end, she nodded. After seeing Xiaoqing nod, its eyes were filled with gratitude and relief. Then, it used the last of its strength and tore its body apart. Its lower body, which was not inferior to its lower body, was torn off from the stitches. It was thrown far away. Only its upper body was left. No, it should be him. It tried its best to crawl in a direction. Xiaoqing followed behind it. Looking at the dark red bloodstains on the ground, there was an indescribable feeling in her heart. It was indeed seriously injured. However, as long as it left this place, found a place to hide, and slowly recovered, it could still live for a long, long time. However, it chose to die. It ended its own life. Xiaoqing guessed that he probably didn't want to live as such a monster. However, when Xiaoqing saw his destination, she realized that there was only one reason why he didn't want to live anymore. That was, there was no reason to live anymore. His lover was gone, and all his enemies were dead. What was the point of living? He might as well accompany his dead lover. Xiaoqing looked at the woman soaked in formalin and said softly, "Don't worry, I will bury you together." The man leaned against the glass and grinned. Xiaoqing broke the container and took out the woman's pale body. She handed it to the man. The man hugged his dead wife tightly. His eyes were full of satisfaction. If they couldn't be born together, then they would be in the same coffin. If there was a next life, he was willing to be her husband. After the men died, Xiaoqing wrapped their bodies in a quilt and quietly took them away. The reinforcements who came to support saw from afar that the entire base turned into a huge mushroom cloud and then disappeared from this world. When Zhao He heard the news, he was so angry that he almost vomited blood. The base of androids that he had spent so much effort to build was destroyed just like that. Those precious materials and researchers were also gone. This meant that if he wanted to build a second base of androids, he would have to start from scratch. It would be strange if he didn't go crazy with anger. On the other hand, Full Moon Whitewater was the opposite of him. Chapter 475. Mochizuki Whitewater's original plan was to let Xiaoqing explore first, then gather Abe Shizuki and his subordinates to destroy the base. But he didn't expect that Xiaoqing would give him such a big surprise. She directly destroyed the base by herself. Mochizuki Whitewater couldn't help but overturn his previous guess. Xiaoqing's strength was probably much stronger than he thought. This was an out-and-out surprise. After all, the stronger Xiaoqing was, the more help she would be to him. When Xiaoqing returned home, Dai was lying on the sofa with ointment all over his back. Xiaoqing leaned over and kissed Dai. Then, she checked him. She found that the wound on Dai's back had healed a little. It seemed that he would be fully recovered in a few days. "Why don't you go upstairs?" Xiaoqing touched Dai's head. Dai crawled forward and put his head on Xiaoqing's lap. Xiaoqing smiled and kissed the back of his head again. "I'll go take a shower first." Then, she went upstairs. When she walked to the bathroom door, she heard the sound of water and Yan Qiue's seductive breathing. Xiaoqing was a little helpless and angry. She really hoped that Yan Qiue's body could fully recover. She made him abstain for the sake of his health. But what about Yan Qiue? She stood at the door for a long time. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. Then, the door opened. Yan Qiue, wearing nothing, walked out with a towel wrapped around his waist. There were shallow wounds on his body. Obviously, he had just satisfied himself. Xiaoqing felt helpless. She was worried that she would hurt Yan Qiue if she got too angry. So, as she hurriedly walked around Yan Qiue and went into the bathroom. Then, Yan Qiue hugged her at the door. Yan Qiue felt wronged. He kissed Xiaoqing's earlobe and whispered, "I didn't." Xiaoqing snorted and pinched the bruises on his waist. Then, what happened? Yan Qiue hurriedly said, "I hit the edge of the bathtub. Qing, you know, although my body is mine, I'm only willing to let you touch me." Xiaoqing sighed. She hugged Yan Qiue and kissed his forehead. Then, she said, "Let's do it when we get home." That. She was talking about home in Jiangxing City. Yan Qiue's eyes lit up. He quickly nodded and said shyly, "Then, let me scrub your back now," when the two came out of the bathtubs. When they came out of the bathtub's body, a certain faces was. And she's, he's was bees get a's. Soon, she would be able to bring her friends and the two at home back to China. They had already settled down in Jiangxing City. There were many of her friends there. She didn't have to worry about her identity being exposed. She didn't have to worry about food, shelter, and transportation. She had people who loved her by her side. A beautiful life was coming. Xiaoqing couldn't wait to go back. She missed Little Bun, Pan Pan, and the others very much. Except for the military, Xiaoqing didn't interfere in other aspects. She let Moon Whitewater and Abe Sherswood do it. Xiaoqing saw clearly that if the two of them joined hands, the country would be theirs sooner or later. The day before Moon Whitewater's huge plan was about to succeed, Xiaoqing found him and said straightforwardly, "I'm leaving. Prepare a boat for me." The smile on Moon Whitewater's face instantly froze. He only felt that the victory in front of him could no longer arouse his joy. Chapter 476. Xiaoqing was leaving. He had a premonition, but he didn't expect this day to come so quickly. He thought that at least Xiaoqing would see him succeed, see him sit in the supreme position, and then leave. At that time, he already had the ability to keep Xiaoqing. Why? Full Moon of Whitewater didn't understand. "I've been here for a long time, and it's already exceeded my expectations. My family is waiting for me at home, and here, you don't need my help anymore," Xiaoqing said lightly. Full Moon of Whitewater's face was a little pale. He was very arrogant. From the beginning, when he came to Xiaoqing's side, he was attracted to Xiaoqing. She was really a very special woman, different from all the women in Japan. He was deeply attracted to her every word, every action, and every action. At that time, Full Moon of Whitewater believed that he was only interested in Xiaoqing. He had never been unable to get what he wanted. Later, he gradually realized that he seemed to like Xiaoqing. He hesitated, but soon he was relieved. If he liked her, he would get her. Full Moon of Whitewater believed in his charm. When he lowered himself to chase a woman, no woman could reject him. But reality gave him a hard slap. Xiaoqing never cared about him, let alone liked him. Rejection after rejection made him feel lost, and at the same time, more and more unwilling. He cared more and more and liked her more and more. In the end, when Xiaoqing told him that she was leaving, Full Moon of Whitewater realized that he couldn't extricate himself. Why did he have to leave? He didn't mind that Xiaoqing had other people by her side, as long as she was willing to stay by his side. He was willing to give her everything, even if what Xiaoqing wanted was the supreme power. But obviously, Xiaoqing didn't care about these things. Full Moon of Whitewater's face became paler and paler. He suddenly walked past Xiaoqing and closed the door. With his back against the door, there was a touch of weakness on his face. Don't go. Don't go. Xiaoqing looked at Full Moon of White Water calmly. There was no emotion in her eyes. Full Moon of White Water took off his clothes, one by one, until he was naked. Whatever they can give you, I can. Whatever they can't give you, I can too. Moongazer Whitewater knelt at the feet of Xiaoqing in a devout manner and kissed Xiaoqing's instep. You're my master, and you'll be the master of this country in the future. Why don't you stay? I beg you. In the past, he had used a joking tone to tell Xiaoqing these things, but Xiaoqing knew very well that it was just a joke. But this time, his voice was trembling. His body was also trembling. His cheek was pressed tightly against her instep, transmitting this trembling from the bottom of his heart to her. Xiaoqing was very calm. When facing her lover, she could be very gentle. When facing unrelated people, her heart could be as hard as stone. She looked at Full Moon of White Water without any fluctuation in her gaze. It was as if the person kneeling before her was not a living beauty, but a pink skeleton. You don't have to be like this. Soon, the entire country will be yours. You can have any woman you want, Xiaoqing said softly. But I only want you. Full Moon of White Water hugged Xiaoqing's leg. His eyes were red and filled with stubbornness. He had always been willful since he was young, but there had never been anything that he wanted so desperately. But I don't want you. Xiaoqing stroked Full Moon of White Water's head and said, Why do you have to degrade yourself? It's time for me to go. Full Moon of White Water hugged Xiaoqing's leg tightly and begged, Can you stay? I can give you anything you want. Look at your heart. Do you really love me? Xiaoqing smiled. There's no need to act like this. It's just a joke. She easily pushed Full Moon of White Water away and opened the door. Just as Xiaoqing stepped out of the door, Full Moon of White Water screamed at the top of his lungs, Go. If you go, I'll destroy this country. Don't you pity them? Don't you want the ordinary people to be saved? I'll destroy them. Xiaoqing's calm voice sounded. Up to you. She strode away without a trace of reluctance. Full Moon of White Water felt an indescribable despair. Why? Why couldn't she be gentler to him? Even 1% of the gentleness she showed to Er Dai and Yan Qiue would have been good enough. He sat on the ground, paralyzed. He did not look like someone who was about to become a supreme ruler. He looked more like a clown trying to please the crowd. He exposed his ugliest, most unbearable, and most pitiful side to that person. But that person did not even bother to look back at him. So cruel. So hateful. Full Moon of White Water covered his face and curled into a ball. He knew that he could not keep her. He could not keep her. Chapter 477. The day Xiaoqing chose to leave was also the most critical day of Mochizuki Shiranui's plan. For some reason, Mochizuki Shiranui did not come to send Xiaoqing off. Only Ito Kumiko and Abe Shizuka came. The ship was prepared by Mochizuki Shiranui. There were several sailors on it. It was big and comfortable. When Xiaoqing took her two pets and Fenglan to the ship, Ito Kumiko knelt there and kowtowed sincerely. She was grateful. If it were not for Xiaoqing, she might have died at sea. If it were not for Xiaoqing, even if she returned to Japan, she would struggle on the edge of death. She would never be able to live such a life. People should be grateful. Ito Kumiko was very satisfied. Let's go back. Before boarding the ship, Xiaoqing turned her head and waved at Ito Kumiko. She said to Abe Shizuku, I hope you can tell Mochizuki Shiranui. Forget it, that's it. She boarded the ship and waved her hand again, bidding farewell to the entire Japan. This country indeed gave her a very bad impression, but one thing could not be concealed. There were also some people who left a deep impression on her. For example, Abe Shizuku, Ito Kumiko, and Mochizuki Shiranui. Abe Shizuku gathered his sleeves and stood for a long time. When the ship became a small black dot, he said, "She came, why didn't she appear? Don't you want to say goodbye to her?" Mochizuki Shiranui slowly walked out of the darkness. His eyes were red, but there were no tears. Because the tears had already flowed out last night. "There's nothing to say." Mochizuki Shiranui's voice was a little hoarse. He stood there for a long time, looking at the direction where Xiaoqing and the others left. Finally, he lowered his head and slowly walked back. He had been abandoned by his master. Although Xiaoqing had never admitted to being his master. In Full Moon Whitewater's life, which was full of twists and turns, but was completely under his control, Xiaoqing was like an accident that couldn't be controlled. She ruthlessly barged in and disrupted his orderly life. She forcefully pulled his heart out of his chest, but refused to take it away and threw it back at his feet. After finishing everything, he clapped his hands and left. Full Moon of Whitewater felt that he hated Xiaoqing, hated her heartlessness. But Full Moon of Whitewater knew that as long as Xiaoqing nodded, he would be willing to leave everything behind. He would leave behind the glory and wealth at his fingertips and follow her, even if it was only as a slave. Sometimes, he despised his own inferiority, but he couldn't help but wonder how cruel that heartless woman was to not even give him a little bit of hope. After walking for a long time, Moongazer Whitewater stopped. He turned around and asked Mikiko Ito, "How about we make a deal?" Mikiko Ito looked at Moongazer Whitewater doubtfully. The pale and stubborn youth curved his lips and then said, "Be my imperial concubine, in name." Probably in the whole country, besides Abe and Shizuka, only Mikiko Ito would remember her. It didn't matter. He would treasure all the memories of her. All of them. As for what Xiaoqing wanted, he would do it. He would make the whole country orderly. Because this was what Xiaoqing wanted to see. Xiaoqing didn't know that there was a youth who was so desperate and helpless because of her departure. Even if she knew, she would only say that it was better to have a short pain than a long pain. Xiaoqing was a very strange person. She could be very gentle to the people she loved. It could be said that she was as gentle as water. But to the people she didn't love, she was ruthless to a terrible extent. Chapter 478. The former was represented by Air Dai and Yan Chiyue, while the latter was represented by Full Moon of Whitewater. No wonder someone asked her if she had a heart. Yes, she gave it to someone she cared about. As for who the person who asked her was. Oh, she forgot. The person who would forget was definitely an unimportant person. The journey back was much smoother than when they came. Moreover, they had a boat, so they didn't need to care about the direction at all. They just needed to wait. Therefore, Xiaoqing's life became eating, sleeping, and talking about Yan Chiyue. After all, she was bored. Then, while she was bored, she actually broke through. Originally, when she was destroying the base of the androids, she felt that she was about to break through. At that time, she was already on the verge of breaking through. However, there was no movement for a long time, so Xiaoqing let nature take its course. Unexpectedly, she broke through to level 6 while she was in a daze. The feeling of level 6 was completely different from the peak of level 5. She even felt that she could face the entire base of androids without a problem. That kind of breakthrough was a kind of suppression of the realm. Just like when she was level 5, she could fight a group of level 4 mutants alone. Now that she was level 6, she could easily fight a group of level 5 mutants alone. People were in high spirits when faced with happy events. Then, there were 2 happy events. After a few days of wandering, they finally returned to the Celestial Empire. The moment she set foot on the land of her own country, her heart was in a mess. Xiaoqing only had one thought now. She wanted to go home. She wanted to go back to see her baby and her friends. When they were about to get off the boat, the helmsman stopped Xiaoqing and handed her a letter. It was said that it was from Full Moon of White Water. Then, the helmsman returned. After watching the boat leave, Xiaoqing wanted to open the letter directly. However, the most important thing now was to send little brother Fenglan back. She first put the letter into the space and took little brother Fenglan back to the base where he lived. He even carried a tuna that was longer than a person. This fish was so big that it was probably enough for Fenglan's whole family to eat for half a month. When the time came, they could directly dry it into salted fish and eat it. Before they got close to the base, Xiaoqing sensed that something was wrong. She smelled the faint scent of blood. Xiaoqing immediately became alert. She made a hand gesture to signal Air Dai and the others to be careful. Then, she slowly approached the base. As soon as they approached, Xiaoqing was shocked. The gate of the base was open, and the gatekeeper was lying in a pool of blood. She quickly led people into the base and saw that the street was in a mess, as if it had just been ransacked. Fenglan's face was pale. If it wasn't for Xiaoqing supporting him, his legs would have gone weak and he wouldn't be able to stand up. I hear voices. Follow me. Xiaoqing led them to the square. When they got closer, they found that everyone was in the square. A group of people were holding guns, and some were empty-handed. They surrounded the people in the base. The people in the base were holding their heads and squatting on the open ground. There were several corpses in front of them. Xiaoqing hurriedly took her friends to hide. They had to observe the situation first before making a decision and taking the next step. Someone was counting. After that, he said to a man who looked like a leader, there are 123 people in total. There are not many women, only 44. Boss, what should we do? The leader waved his hand and said, keep the women, kill the men. Also, pay attention to the good-looking men. The old ones are a waste of food. Kill them all. The man who was counting immediately asked, what about the children? Chapter 479. Children can't be played with. Fortunately, their meat is tender. It's like cooking them after they die, someone immediately said with a sinister smile. Third brother is right. Let's kill all the men first. Since this place is near the sea, we don't lack salt. We can make them into jerky and store them. We won't have to worry about food for a while. The leader touched his chin and said. Fenglan immediately saw Fengyu, who was protecting a few children. He was anxious. If Xiaoqing hadn't held him back, he would have already rushed out. Don't be impulsive, Xiaoqing said calmly. Leave it to me. Fenglan clenched his fists tightly and nodded. Xiaoqing looked at the direction of the wind and scattered the daughter seeds first. She was afraid that when a fight broke out, some people would go crazy and kill ordinary people first. They had to guard against this. After all, Fenglan's elder sister, Fengyu, and his younger brothers and sisters were in the crowd. The leader was about to give the order when he suddenly smelled a faint fragrance. He turned around and saw his subordinates looking up in shock. Their jaws were about to fall off as they looked behind him. The leader followed his gaze and saw a big tree appear out of thin air behind him. It was still growing slowly. The huge crown of the tree covered the sky and stretched its branches wantonly. Bits of light fell down and landed on the tip of his nose. It was a little itchy. What was this? Just when the leader was a little confused, he suddenly heard a scream. Warm blood splashed on his face, and the leader was so scared that he subconsciously activated his ability. He saw that vines had drilled out from under the tree and dragged one of his men under the tree. After his subordinate was dragged under the tree, he was directly dismembered by many vines. The pieces of his corpse were dragged under the tree by the vines and turned into nutrients. The tree's roots quickly drilled out from the ground and pierced into the nutrients, absorbing the rich nutrients. The leader didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the branches and leaves of this tree were more luxuriant. The branches and leaves moved without wind, and the rustling sound seemed to be expressing its joy. While he was still in shock, more and more people were dragged under the tree and turned into nourishment for the tree. He wanted to shout for the enemy to attack and get everyone to prepare for battle, but no sound came out of his mouth. His throat was blocked by something. The last thing his subordinate saw was the leader opening his mouth, and green leaves and sprouts were scrambling to crawl out of his throat. Then, there was no then. Xiaoqing clapped her hands and stood out from the dark. Except for a man who had already peed in his pants, everyone else had already become Light's nourishment. The man was really scared to the point of peeing. The yellow liquid flowed down his crotch and dripped to the ground. His hand was still holding the gun, but the gun in his hand had already fallen to the ground with the yellow liquid. Xiaoqing flung out her vines and dragged him over. Then, she hung him a little distance away from her in disgust. She was going to ask him about it after cleaning up the scene. As soon as the battle was over, Feng Lan was the first to rush into the crowd and hug Feng Yu. Sister, are you okay?" Feng Yu was really scared to death. She turned around and hugged Feng Lan, crying bitterly. As soon as she cried, the children cried as well. The whole square was filled with crying. After all, after this group of people had built this small base, they had been living in peace on this coast. There was nothing nearby that was worth fighting over, so it had been very peaceful. They didn't expect that a group of robbers would suddenly come today. They burned, killed, and robbed, and even wanted to turn them into food reserves. If Xiaoqing hadn't stopped that group of robbers in time, the women would have been raped, and the men would have become jerky that was about to be pickled. After surviving a disaster, it was really a feeling of not being able to cry out loud. Some people cried because their family members had died. When this group of robbers entered the city, they had resisted stubbornly, and many people had died in the resistance. Feng Lan had seen the world, so she was calmer. After comforting Feng Yu, she began to arrange for people to clean up the scene. Xiaoqing was still carrying the tuna on her shoulder. She asked kindly, "Who are you? Why did you come here? What do you want to do?" The man was trembling. Let alone talking, his whole body was shaking like he had Parkinson's disease. Xiaoqing said patiently, "I'll give you 3 seconds to calm down, and then tell me what you need to say. Of course, you can refuse, but I don't think you want to experience the consequences." The man trembled and quickly shouted, "We are robbers. A zombie tide broke out inland, and everywhere is chaotic. We have no choice but to come to the coast." Xiaoqing's face turned cold. What happened? Chapter 480. Xiaoqing didn't care about the stinky smell of the captive anymore. She dragged him over with the vines and asked him coldly, "What happened?" "I don't know, I really don't know. There was a sudden outbreak of zombies. Everything was in chaos. Many bases were attacked by zombies. Now, there are almost no small bases left. Many bases have merged together. We are all robbers. We are the kind that are registered in the bases. We don't dare to join any of the bases. We can only run to the coastal area." The captive cried. His boss was unlucky this year. She chose a base that had a strong backer. Damn, she bumped into the muzzle of the enemy's gun. She was wiped out by the enemy and turned into fertilizer. His words were too vague. Xiaoqing couldn't judge whether Little Bun and the others were safe or not. Xiaoqing immediately threw the captive aside and said to Feng Lan, "I have to go. Take these. If you can't do it, go to Jiang City and join me." But there are no living people in Jiang City. She took out a bunch of food from her space and stuffed them all into Feng Lan's hands. Then, she took her 2 pets and went back home. Xiaoqing didn't have time to care about the base. Her mind was full of Little Bun and the others. She was panicking. Yan Qiuat quickly comforted her, "It will be fine. Don't forget that Jiang City is a zombie city. Even if there is a zombie outbreak, Jiang City will be fine." Xiaoqing was worried. After being comforted by Yan Qiuat, she was a little relieved. After all, it was useless to be worried. Even if something really happened, she had to calm down and deal with it. Because of her concern, Xiaoqing and the others walked for 2 days in 1 day. But at night, they still had to stop and rest. Because even if Xiaoqing and Dai were zombies and wouldn't be tired or hurt, Yan Qiuat was a normal person. After stopping, Dai went to hunt. Yan Qiuat was in charge of setting up the tent. Xiaoqing sat in the same place and opened the letter that Full Moon of White Water left for her. During the day, her heart was filled with thoughts of her son and her friends. She had completely forgotten about the letter. Now that she had stopped to rest, she remembered it again. When Xiaoqing opened the letter, Yan Qiuat was setting up the tent and peeking. After all, it was a letter from his rival. He had to read it clearly. "Know yourself and know your enemy, you will never be defeated." Xiaoqing opened the letter and was stunned. "My master, you must have reached the other side of the sea, when you set your feet tsts. When you set foots tsssts. SSTSSTs TTSTSSS. Really TTTSS. Of course T-est. I'll do everything you want me to do. When the whole island becomes what you imagined, you'll come back to see me." "Yes. Please let me deceive myself. At least I'll have a goal. When you reach the other continent, it'll probably be the time for me to determine success or failure. My queen, no matter what, please don't forget me." The signature was Full Moon of White Water's handprint. It looked like a slave contract. After Xiaoqing read it, she had an indescribable feeling. She was too cruel to Full Moon of White Water, but she didn't regret it. Xiaoqing already had a partner that she could spend the rest of her life with, so there was no need to give Mochizuki Whitewater any hope. It was better to cut the pain short than to prolong the pain. If she gave him hope and made him despair, she might as well cut off all his thoughts from the beginning. Chapter 481. Besides, one pervert like Yan Qiuat was enough. She wouldn't be able to take it if there were more. Before Xiaoqing finished thinking, Yan Qiuat stuck close to her and complained, "Qing, why are you so good at attracting bees and butterflies?" Another one. After saying that, he secretly took out the letter. No, it should be said that he took out the letter openly and said, "I'll take care of this." He had already thought of 100 ways to deal with it. He would cut it into pieces, burn it to ashes, and scatter it in the river or the sea. In short, it would be fine as long as Xiaoqing never saw it again. She was already so far away. He was still coveting his wife. How shameless was he? My queen, she's obviously his. She was Yan Qiuat's queen. Fortunately, Xiaoqing didn't treat Full Moon of Whitewater well. He knew that his intuition told him that Full Moon of Whitewater wasn't a good person. Xiaoqing helplessly let go. Okay. You deal with it. She didn't want to attract bees and butterflies, but the heavens were jealous of her beauty. Sigh, she seemed to have been infected by something. After getting the right to deal with his love rival's letter, Yan Qiue was obviously in a better mood. He quickly set up the tent and took the letter to destroy it. Xiao Qing sat there holding her chin. She calmly compared Full Moon of Whitewater and Yan Qiue. From appearance to figure to personality, her Yan Qiue was indeed cuter. Especially when they were doing that. Xiao Qing had to admit that ever since she became Yan Qiue's lover, she had gradually turned into a masochist who only waved her whip at Yan Qiue. Especially after reading a lot of books, Xiao Qing found that masochists actually yearned to be treated like that, whether physically or mentally. The more painful it was, the more excited they were. In other words, if Xiao Qing wanted to be a qualified lover, she couldn't be soft-hearted when it came to Yan Qiue. If it weren't for the fact that she had more important things to do, Xiao Qing really wanted to put the theory she had just learned into practice. Air Dai soon brought the prey back. After eating and drinking, Xiao Qing went to sleep with 2 women in his arms. The sky had just brightened when she brought the 2 of them on the road. Just like that, they rushed for a few days. As they gradually entered the inland, they realized that the captive's words were too light. The entire celestial empire was in chaos. Not long ago, some zombies disguised as humans sneaked into a base. Then, overnight, all the ordinary people in the base were infected. The zombies that sneaked into the base cooperated with the zombies outside and broke through the entire base. The consequences could be imagined. The human base was in an uproar. Although Xiao Qing was different from ordinary zombies were still very different from human beings. Therefore, no one thought that zombies could sneak into human bases until it really happened. After the tragedy in this base, all the bases began to be on high alert. The checks for entering and exiting became extremely strict. If unfamiliar survivors wanted to enter the base, they had to go through more than a dozen checks. Once a strange person was found, they would be caught without hesitation. They would rather catch the wrong person than let them go. However, under such circumstances, there was still another base that followed in the footsteps of the previous base. Because the zombies that sneaked into the base had a special ability, hallucination. At that time, people realized that zombies had unknowingly evolved to a very scary level. Chapter 482. Originally, zombies were no longer the most terrible enemy of human beings, especially after paranormals evolved to a high degree. They even began to clean up the cities that had been occupied by zombies, trying to return to the cities. Then, zombies gave them a vivid lesson. In just half a month, 3 bases had fallen. Except for the few survivors, the rest of the people in the bases had become zombies' food. Through the descriptions of the survivors, people discovered that there were not only evolved zombies that looked very similar to humans, but there were also zombies with superpowers. There was also a very common phenomenon, which was that zombies had a very high IQ. This was very bad news for human beings, but it was just the beginning. Not long after, the cities that had been cleaned up began to rebound. The Zombie King led the zombies to surround those cities, launching a wave of zombies. Their purpose was very clear, which was to take back those cities. The whole country was in chaos, and even the capital was not spared. Xiao Qing witnessed the chaos. Just like at the beginning of the apocalypse, people who had lost their homes had to gather in groups to guard against zombies and move aimlessly. They either found a large base that could accommodate them and stayed after going through many inspections, or they were ambushed by zombies halfway and became zombies' food. Too many people were displaced, and more bases did not dare to accept them, because there was a precedent of zombies mixing in with the refugees. The bases were like birds that were startled by the twang of a bow, and even the slightest movement could scare them into hiding in their shells. That made it even more difficult for the refugees to find a place to stay. Xiaoqing and the others had tried to find a base to inquire about the situation, but they gave up directly after looking at the inspection process. The first inspection was to enter a secret room and strip naked for a full-body inspection. It was not only troublesome, but also unacceptable. At least, Xiaoqing did not want to be inspected like pigs or cows waiting to be slaughtered. Therefore, they became refugees through the channel to get information. Most of the refugees went to the capital, because the capital at least would not be like most of the bases now, which directly refused outsiders to become members of the base. Although the inspection process was just as troublesome, or even more troublesome, as long as there was a place to stay, they would be satisfied. After collecting some information, Xiaoqing was relieved. At least, as a zombie city, nothing would happen to Jiang City. Unless there was another wave of zombies coming to take over the territory, but was Yi easy to bully? Come to take over the territory. If they were not careful, they would become food. Therefore, Xiaoqing was not worried about them. Looking at the current situation of the Celestial Empire, Xiaoqing's entire person was somewhat unwell. When she was setting up camp at night, she would flip over and over in her mind. On one hand, she felt that she should not meddle in other people's business. After all, she could not bear to see those innocent people become zombies' food. She thought further ahead. The apocalypse had to come to an end. She really wanted to return to the peaceful era before the apocalypse, not for herself, but for the next generation, for Little Bun. Xiaoqing was already used to the apocalypse. It could even be said that she was like a fish in water. However, Little Bun was different. He was still a child and needed a stable learning environment. He needed to live a normal life. The apocalypse could not give him these things. Xiaoqing always believed that the apocalypse was a disaster, and all disasters would come to an end. The apocalypse was the same, it would come to an end one day. She could be the push for the arrival of this day. It would be good to be one day earlier. Xiaoqing did not want little Bao to grow up and tell her, "Mommy, my biggest wish is to see the sun and the blue sky." Dai and Yan Qiue could see that she was absent-minded. Dai could not say anything, he could only hug her tightly and comfort her with actions. Yan Qiue could do more things. For example, when she was thinking about something very complicated, he could remind her, "Do whatever you want, because no matter what you choose, we will support you." Xiaoqing was the backbone of the two of them, Pan Pan and the others. Yan Qiue believed that as long as Xiaoqing said one word, even if it was against the whole human race, the group of friends would not oppose. Xiaoqing did not say anything in the end. After rushing for more than 10 days, they finally returned to Jiang City. Chapter 483. Jiang City looked as peaceful as ever, but the originally clean city walls were suddenly covered with red thorns. These thorns were actually dark red in color. If one didn't look carefully, they would only think that they were black. Only when they were reflected by the sunlight would they realize that the dark red color was like dried blood. It looked a little creepy. There were zombies and mutated animals tied up in some places, indicating that these thorns weren't as harmless as they looked. A few nimble zombies were getting the zombies and mutated animals trapped on the thorns down. The zombies were better off. After all, the blood in their bodies was almost dried up. The mutated animals were more pitiful. They were tightly tied up, and the thorns pierced into their bodies and sucked their blood. After sucking the blood, the thorns looked a lot brighter. Some of the thorns even had small buds hanging on them. It seemed to have changed a lot. When Xiaoqing reached the door, a small gust of wind rushed in and bumped into her arms. "Mama!" Xiaoqing picked up the little bun. Her heart was sour and bitter. "Baby, I'm back, baby." There was a group of people behind the little bun. They all ran out with the little bun. Early in the morning, the little bun didn't run out to play or be naughty. He just sat by the window and rested his chin on his hand, looking out of the city. When someone asked him, he said that he had a feeling that his mama was coming back. Others didn't believe him, but Gu Pan Pan and the others believed him. Each one was more excited and nervous than the other. When the little bun rushed out, they rushed out as well. The little girl zombie, who had been raised well by the little bun, also followed them out. In the end, she saw Xiaoqing at a glance. The little girl zombie was speechless. Her mother-in-law was actually the powerful zombie that almost killed her. Zombie birth pill. Mama, baby missed you so much. The little bun pitifully whined in Xiaoqing's arms, his big eyes filled with tears. Xiaoqing's heart ached. She hugged him tightly and quickly swore. Baby, don't worry. Mama won't leave you alone again, okay? Yes. The little bun snuggled into Xiaoqing's arms. After a while, he suddenly remembered that he hadn't shown his new wife to his mother yet. Even an ugly daughter-in-law had to see her parents-in-law, not to mention that his little wife was quite cute. Little Baozi immediately turned around and waved his hand. Wife, come and see my mama. When Xiaoqing heard this, she was angry. Who took advantage of her absence to seduce her son? Did he want to die? Her son was so young, yet she dared to seduce him. The above was Granny Xiao, who was already speaking incoherently. The little girl zombie who was about to sneak away but was called out was speechless. Her life was still in Little Bun's hands, so she could only pitifully turn around and walk towards Little Bun. Oh. Xiaoqing looked at the culprit who seduced her son. Oh, it looked familiar. She looked again. Wasn't it the zombie that injured Air Dai? She had actually become her daughter-in-law. Did she ask for her mother-in-law's opinion? Xiaoqing was so angry that she temporarily ignored her companions. She stared at the little zombie girl and asked, "What's going on?" The little bun quickly described the process of how he caught her. Then, he told her that he was short of one person to fight the landlord. So, he kept her to play the role of his new wife. Xiaoqing was speechless. Her son really knew how to pick things up. If she knew that her son was this zombie's nemesis, she would have done it herself. After communicating with Xiaoqing and knowing that the little girl zombie had been restrained and wouldn't betray her, Xiaoqing allowed her son to have one more toy. Chapter 484. She held her son's hand and walked towards her friends. I'm back. Sister Qing. Gu Pan Pan covered her mouth, tears glistening in her eyes. She had rarely been separated from Xiaoqing for so long and so far. In fact, there were some people in the crowd who were even more excited, but they didn't show it. For example, Yan Hanqing said calmly, "Let's go home first. Breakfast is ready. We'll talk after breakfast." Okay. Xiaoqing held little Bao's hand and walked into Jiang City. However, when she turned around, she saw that Yan Hanqing's eyes were a little red. While having breakfast, Xiaoqing learned about the current situation in Jiang City. The thorns on the city wall were found by Yan Hanqing and Yin Yi. They found them in the depths of a large forest. Since the outbreak of the zombie tide not long ago, Jiang City had been harassed by the same kind of zombies. It seemed that there were other kinds of zombies secretly coveting Jiang City. Therefore, they went to find these ghost thorns, nicknamed vampires, and planted them on the city wall. Those who didn't go through the main gate were all hung up. Through her friends, Xiaoqing also learned that the situation in China was very serious, but it had been contained to a certain extent. At least, there were no more zombies sneaking into the survivors' bases. Many bases had joined hands to form teams of paranormals to resist the zombie tide. Hearing this, Xiaoqing felt a lot more at ease. She was not a savior who could save the world. Now that the situation outside was slowly improving, she could close the door and live her own life without any psychological burden. On the first day back home, Dai and Yan Qiue were kicked out of the room. Little Bao successfully took over half of Xiao Qing's bed. Poor Dai and Yan Qiue had to sleep in another room with their quilts. There were many people who couldn't sleep tonight, including Xiao Qing, who was hugging the little bun, Yan Qiue, who had just returned home and was not used to it, and Yan Hanqing. He was a little panicked. In the past, although Dai and Yan Qiue were very close to Xiao Qing, he wasn't afraid because in Xiao Qing's eyes, they were the same as him. However, this time, Yan Hanqing found that the atmosphere between Dai, Yan Qiue, and Xiao Qing had changed. No one could get in between them. Sometimes, the pink bubbles that came out of nowhere were sweet. He felt that something was wrong, so he had to think of the worst-case scenario. Did Yan Qiue confess? And Xiao Qing accepted it. If that was the case, he really didn't have a chance. Yan Hanqing tried hard to suppress the panic in his heart. He became one of the people who couldn't sleep. Because they couldn't sleep that night, everyone woke up early the next day. When Xiao Qing got out of bed, many people were still sleeping. She took little Bao to the bathroom to wash her face and brush her teeth. She found Yan Hanqing inside. Yan Hanqing had just washed his face and there were still water droplets on his temples. When he saw Xiao Qing, his gaze became much gentler. Morning. Morning. Xiao Qing held little Bao while Yan Hanqing took a small stool from the side and put it under little Bao's feet. At a glance, they really looked like a family of three. After little Bao stepped on the stool, he began to skillfully squeeze toothpaste and brush his teeth. Xiao Qing stood beside little Bao. Yan Hanqing was about to leave, but he stopped. He stood at the door and watched this warm scene for a long time. When Xiao Qing looked at him in confusion, he asked calmly, "What do you want to eat for breakfast?" "I'll make it." Chapter 485. Xiao Qing thought about it while brushing her teeth. After a while, she spat out the foam in her mouth and said, "Make porridge. It's good for the stomach. I want to eat porridge with preserved egg and lean meat." "Do you still have preserved egg?" "Yes." Yan Hanqing said softly, "I'll make it." In a trance, he felt that they were like a family of three. But at this time, Yan Hanqing and Dai came out one after another. After greeting Yan Hanqing, they went into the bathroom. Xiao Qing's mouth was still full of foam when she was kissed by the two of them. Yan Hanqing couldn't help but feel sad. Indeed, something was different now. After breakfast was ready, everyone sat around the table. While eating, they listened to Xiao Qing talk about what they encountered after they went out. The magnificent sea, the dangerous underwater volcano eruption, and the strange country. Gu Panpan was surprised. Although Xiao Tong couldn't speak, her eyes were glued to Xiao Qing with curiosity. When breakfast was almost finished, Xiao Qing suddenly said, "I'm going to get married. How about picking a good day?" Everyone present, including Dai and Yan Qiue, was dumbfounded. Especially Qiue, he had never thought about marriage. After all, in the apocalypse, it was only him and Dummy who followed Xiao Qing. Marriage was just a dream for him, nothing more. He didn't expect that Xiao Qing would take the initiative to mention it. In fact, after she mentioned it, Xiao Qing also felt that it was inappropriate. Dai hadn't recovered his memory yet. It was a bit inappropriate for her to make such a decision. The most anxious one was Gu Panpan. She asked eagerly, "Sister Qing, who are you going to marry?" Xiao Qing coughed and said, Dai, Yan Qiue. She announced domineeringly, "They are both mine." Gu Panpan was furious. Look, even Yan Qiue, who came later, was ahead of her. What about her brother? No wonder he couldn't find a wife. At this moment, Gu Panpan was not the only one who was shocked. Everyone was shocked, such as Yan Hanqing. The veins on his hand that was holding the spoon were about to pop out. His face remained expressionless. Xiaoqing said very calmly, after experiencing the previous experience and the wandering on the sea, I realized a lot. Life is not long, but it's not short either. It's only 100 years, so we should enjoy ourselves. I like them and they like me. Why do we have to torment each other? It'll be too late if we regret it when we miss it. The scene was silent. Everyone had different thoughts. After a long time, Gu Panpan said with difficulty, Are you really going to get married? Xiaoqing hesitated and looked at Dai. She was sure about Yan Qiue. Not to mention getting married, as long as she said, Yan Qiue, marry me, Yan Qiue would immediately put on the wedding dress, prepare her own dowry, and willingly marry her. But what about Dai? Dai was different from Yan Qiue. He relied on her, like a chick relying on its mother. He was willing to sacrifice his life for her, like a child protecting his mother. But in the end, he had no memory. Xiaoqing's actions were no different from kidnapping. Yan Qiue also understood Xiaoqing's concerns. He quickly said, There's no rush to get married. We can do it any time. Let's wait until Dai recovers first. Xiaoqing looked at Yan Qiue apologetically. He had always been the one to compromise. Yan Qiue smiled. He was willing to do anything for her. The atmosphere between the two of them was too sticky. The few people who had different thoughts felt very complicated, especially Yan Hanqing. He was the second person besides Dai to fall in love with Xiaoqing. It was just that people who didn't know how to express their feelings were at a disadvantage. Chapter 486. Yan Hanqing held his spoon tightly. He couldn't help but feel jealous as he reflected on himself. In the end, he realized that he had never told Xiaoqing that he loved her. This was probably the difference between them. Although Yan Qiue came later, he was passionate. He said what he loved, unlike him who kept it to himself. If he kept it to himself, someone else would beat him to it. It would be a lie to say that he didn't regret it, but it was too late for regrets. Yan Hanqing clenched his teeth tightly. He was so sad that he couldn't extricate himself. In the end, he suddenly realized a very serious problem. If Xiaoqing could accept Yan Qiue and Dai, did that mean that she could also accept him? No matter what, he had an advantage over some people. He had been to third base before. If he learned from Yan Qiue and pestered her, he might still have a chance. Yan Hanqing, whose thoughts were completely crooked, didn't realize what he was thinking at all. Yan Hanqing, whose thoughts had already become strange, was thinking very hard. His expression was still very serious. After Xiaoqing considered Yan Qiue's words, she temporarily put aside the matter of marriage. She really wanted to get married. To put it bluntly, she wanted to give the two of them a status. Marriage was a very sacred thing. Those who didn't walk down the aisle of marriage, even if they became a real couple, would still have regrets. Xiaoqing wanted to hold a wedding. Although they couldn't get a marriage certificate at this time, she still wanted to use this wedding to tell everyone. Yan Qiue and Dai were her lovers. They were the people she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. They were husband and wife. Xiaoqing, who had no choice but to put this thought aside, was a little unhappy. However, with her son accompanying her, she wasn't in a bad mood. Her son was very obedient. Xiaoqing accompanied Little Bun to shovel the sand or something, Little Bun suddenly asked Xiaoqing, Mama, are you looking for a stepfather for baby? Xiaoqing hesitated for a moment. Then she coughed and said, Baby, don't you like Chiyue? Don't you like Dazed? Bao Bao likes Dai Dai, but I don't like that big baddie Chiyu. The little bun pouted and said, he looks like a bad guy. Does Mama want him to be baby's stepfather? But everyone says that after having a stepfather, there will be a stepmother. After having a stepfather, Mama won't want Bao Bao anymore. Xiaoqing felt that there was still a problem. Perhaps some people were born to be incompatible. Little Bun had never liked Yan Chiyue, but Yan Chiyue was her partner. If Little Bun and Yan Chiyue didn't get along well, she would be in a difficult position. Therefore, Xiaoqing asked the Little Bun very seriously, Did Uncle Chiyue do anything bad to you? Little Bun thought for a long time, then shook his head hesitantly. Xiaoqing continued to ask, Then did Uncle Chiyue not treat you well? Little Bun thought for a long time and continued to shake his head. Xiaoqing patted his head. Then why did you say that Uncle Chiyue is a bad person? Because he looks like a bad guy. Little Bun pouted even more. If someone says that they don't like to be friends with you because you don't look like a good child, would you feel aggrieved? Xiaoqing said very patiently. Little Bun nodded and immediately showed an aggrieved expression. We have to judge others by our own standards. If you don't want to be like that, then why do you want to treat others like that? Xiaoqing said very gently. Mama likes Uncle Chiyue a lot and wants to marry him so that we can become a family. Therefore, Mama hopes that Bao Bao can like him too. Don't look at him with a strange gaze, okay? Little Bun nodded seriously. Then, he thought that everyone said that it was very tiring for a single mother to take care of a baby. Mama worked so hard to raise him and finally found someone she liked. If he were to mess things up for Mama, Mama would definitely be very upset. Then, he would reluctantly like Yan Chiyue. If Yan Chiyue married his Mama, did that mean that he could bully Yan Chiyue to his heart's content? Thinking about it this way, it was pretty good. Little Bun quickly changed his mind. Mama, don't worry and marry Dai Dai and Yan Chiyue. Little Bun clenched his fist and said, I will take good care of my daddy. Of course, this take care referred to Dai Dai. As for Yan Chiyue, he would also take good care of her. My baby is so obedient. Xiaoqing went up and gave Little Bun a big kiss. Then, she said, Bao Bao has grown up and is becoming more and more obedient. Xiaoqing, who solved this important problem, breathed a sigh of relief. After all, people were most afraid of a fire in their backyard. After she settled everything, she just had to wait for Er Dai to recover his memory. As soon as Er Dai recovered, she would immediately propose. If Er Dai was still willing to be with her, that would be the best. If Er Dai changed his mind, it didn't matter. She could still play in the small dark room after she was knocked unconscious. No, she would let go. She really would. After solving this problem, Xiaoqing's mood was a lot better. Every day, she would tease Little Bun, bully the little girl zombie, and hug the two zombies at home. Her life was simply like a fairy. And Yan Hanqing was already on the verge of exploding. Chapter 487. Some things, once accumulated, could erupt all at once, could be very scary. Yan Hanqing was one such example. Other than accompanying the children, Xiaoqing would practice her skills when she had nothing to do. Usually, her opponent was Yan Hanqing. After all, Yan Hanqing had learned a thing or two from her. Even if he didn't use his special ability, he was still evenly matched with her. On this day, Xiaoqing had agreed to practice with Yan Hanqing. However, after eating and running for a while, there was still no sign of Yan Hanqing. Xiaoqing went upstairs to check on Yan Hanqing. She pushed open Yan Hanqing's door. The door wasn't closed, so she stuck her head in to look around. However, she didn't see anyone. Where did Yan Hanqing go? She entered the room and shouted, "Hanqing. I'm here." Yan Hanqing's voice came from inside the room. He sounded a little weak. Xiaoqing frowned and walked over. "Hanqing, what's wrong?" As soon as she walked in, she was stopped by Yan Hanqing. Xiaoqing was stunned for a moment. She instinctively wanted to pull her hand away, but she saw Yan Hanqing's red eyes. Her movements immediately stiffened. She didn't know what to do. "Maybe the two of us need to have a good talk," Yan Hanqing said calmly. Xiaoqing was silent for a moment before she said, "Let's go outside." The two of them walked one after the other to the sofa outside. Yan Hanqing poured Xiaoqing a glass of water. His actions were very calm. Xiaoqing took the glass of water and asked, "What's wrong?" Yan Hanqing had always been a man of few words. He hesitated for a long time, probably thinking about how to say it. In the end, he asked slowly, "You're with Dai and Yan Qiue?" "Yeah." Although Yan Hanqing's tone wasn't a question, Xiaoqing still responded. Ever since the last incident, there was a slight awkwardness between her and Yan Hanqing. Although the awkwardness slowly faded as time passed, Xiaoqing still felt inexplicably uncomfortable when the two of them sat alone. "Qing," Yan Hanqing looked at Xiaoqing seriously. "I always thought you knew." "Knew what?" Xiaoqing reflexively raised her voice. It was as if she knew that what Yan Hanqing was going to say next would make it difficult for her to choose. "I thought you knew that I liked you." Yan Hanqing dropped a bomb and laughed bitterly at himself. Then he said, "I didn't know how to speak since I was young, so I didn't talk much. After I met you, there were many times when I actually liked you very much. There were many things I wanted to say to you, but I wasn't good with words and couldn't say them. So I kept dragging it out. In the end," he said helplessly, "have I never told you that I liked you?" Xiaoqing was dumbfounded. She didn't expect that what Yan Hanqing wanted to say to her was this. She could actually feel that Yan Hanqing treated her differently, but she had been avoiding it, especially after she got together with Dai and Yan Qiue. With Dai and Yan Qiue, it wouldn't be good for Yan Hanqing if others saw her ambiguous words with Yan Hanqing. She couldn't let others think that she loved every man she met. "I suddenly remembered that I still have something to do," Xiaoqing quickly said. Then, just as she stood up, before she could leave, Yan Hanqing grabbed her wrist and pressed her down on the sofa. "Why are you avoiding it?" Yan Hanqing's handsome face was inches away. He had always been a strong man, but at this moment, his eyes were red. He clenched his teeth and asked Xiaoqing a second time, "Why are you avoiding it?" Xiaoqing trembled. She didn't know how to answer. She gently pushed Yan Hanqing and said, "I really have something to do." Chapter 488. Yan Hanqing looked at Xiaoqing affectionately and painfully. "I've liked you for a long time, from the first time you appeared in front of me. Where did I lose? Was it because I didn't know how to express myself? Qing, can you give me a chance? I want to marry you." What did it feel like to confess to a man who was as silent and stern as a mountain? Anyway, Xiaoqing was stunned. She was silent for a long time before saying, "I already have a partner, too, one more is fine." Yan Hanqing's mouth finally became clever for once. He continued, "We did it as husband and wife." Xiaoqing said with difficulty, "That was just an accident, but that did happen between us. I have to take responsibility for you." Yan Hanqing insisted. He had practiced in front of the mirror for a long time just for this day. He wasn't good with words, so he had to organize his words in front of the mirror over and over again. He didn't know how to speak, so he wrote down everything he wanted to say on paper and repeated it over and over again. He didn't know anything else. He only knew that he liked Xiaoqing, so he had to fight for it. If he didn't even fight for it, he deserved it if he didn't get it. How would he know if Xiaoqing wouldn't accept him if he didn't try? I don't need. Xiaoqing was forced back step by step. Her back was tightly pressed against the sofa. She had never been confessed to like this before. Yan Qiue only knew how to act coquettishly, and Dai was the cute type. It was the first time she had encountered a confession that was filled with masculinity and aggression like Yan Hanqing's. So she panicked. At this moment, Yan Hanqing was possessed by Yan Qiue. He said shamelessly, "Okay, but that was my first time. You have to take responsibility for me." Xiaoqing was stunned. It took her a long time to recover. She stuttered, You are a man. How can I take responsibility?" Yan Hanqing was eloquent. It was impossible to tell that he was a man of few words. "You are discriminating against men and women. Why don't men need to take responsibility? I need you to be responsible." The Spartan Xiaoqing. Was this still the honest man she knew? Bang! What kind of monster was this? Xiaoqing, who really wanted to shout this sentence, quickly calmed down and returned to her normal state. Then, she said, "Hanqing, let's not joke around. You know. I'm not joking." Yan Hanqing said expressionlessly, "Xiaoqing, I like you. I love you. I'm willing to give you everything I have, including my heart and my life. Why don't you admit that you have me in your heart? If you don't have me, why are you running away?" Xiaoqing's heart, which had just calmed down, was in a mess again. She grabbed Yan Hanqing's shoulder and tried to calm down again. "Hanqing, that's enough. No matter what, I have a boyfriend now. You have to think carefully. Why can Dai and Yan Qiue, but I can't?" Yan Hanqing looked very calm, but in fact, his heart was in a mess. He really didn't understand why Xiaoqing could accept the two of them, but rejected him. Xiaoqing took a deep breath and said, "Liking is a matter between two people. It doesn't mean that I have to like you just because you like me. It doesn't mean that I have to be with you just because you love me. Liking is equal. It takes two hands to clap. A melon that is forcefully picked is not sweet." Xiaoqing knew that these words might be unpleasant to hear, and it would make one's heart cold. However, just like moon-gazing white water, it was better to get the pain over with. Instead of letting Yan Hanqing's love for her become an obsession, it was better to cut it off. If Yan Hanqing was estranged from her because of this, it couldn't be helped. She already had Yan Hanqing and Dai. She couldn't be ambiguous with other men. Even if she had something with Yan Hanqing in the past, it was all in the past. What was in the past was in the past, and it was already in the past. Yan Hanqing didn't look like he was hurt at all. He just said calmly, "But you clearly have me in your heart. You just don't want to admit it. If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have chosen to do that with me back then. I was forced to do it." As soon as Xiaoqing spoke, she was interrupted by Yan Hanqing. "You clearly had other choices. For example, you could have gone somewhere else to find another woman. You could have done it in time, but you chose to help me. Isn't it because you have me in your heart? Because I know that you wouldn't have done it with someone else." Xiaoqing was stunned halfway through her words. In fact, she knew and cared about him. She also had him in her heart, yes, it was just that she refused to admit it. "Let me calm down." Xiaoqing quickly pushed Yan Hanqing away and ran out like a gust of wind. Everything that Yan Hanqing said to her today left her at a loss. Her whole person was in a mess. She didn't think that Yan Hanqing would suddenly confess to her, and it was even so. In short, Xiaoqing was in a terrible mess right now. In the room, Yan Hanqing sat calmly on the sofa. He didn't stand up to chase after her. He just quietly picked up the glass of water that Xiaoqing drank from and drank it all in one gulp. In the past, he was too quiet and didn't know how to speak. Therefore, some things were taken advantage of by others. Now, he understood that if he loved someone, he had to say it. What was the point of holding it in? If he held it in, would the woman he liked know? Even if the woman he liked knew, would he still have to wait for her to confess? No, the end result would only be that the woman he liked was confessed to by someone else, and then they became a couple. A lot of what he said today was very intense, and it would also provoke Xiaoqing. Yan Hanqing was very clear about this. However, now that Xiaoqing and Yan Hanqing were together, if he didn't give her a strong dose of medicine, he really wouldn't have any chance at all. Actually, his original idea was to take advantage of Xiaoqing's chaos to open her heart. However, when it came to it, he realized that it was a little difficult. Just let her be alone. This matter wasn't easy to solve. After all, he was indeed a step too late. Someone had already beaten him to it. The one who made the first move was the strongest. The one who made the move later would have to work 100 times harder than the one who made the move earlier. However, he had enough patience to wait and wear her down. He would definitely be able to wear down this stubborn rock called Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing left as if she was escaping. Her footsteps were in a mess. Then, she gave Yan Qiue, who was coming downstairs, a shock. "Ah, Qing, what's wrong with you?" Xiaoqing quickly calmed down. Then, she coughed and turned her face to the side. "I wanted to go out. I left in a hurry. Do you want to go together?" Yan Qiue walked over. "I was just about to go out for a walk." Xiaoqing looked left and right. Then, she had a flash of inspiration. "I've broken through to level 6. I'm about to look for a mutated plant. Let's go out again in a few days." She definitely wasn't running away. Chapter 489. In order to prevent Yan Hanqing from causing any more trouble, Xiaoqing ran very fast. She packed her things and ran out, but this time there were more people going out. In addition to Dai and Yan Qiue, there were also Xiao Bao, who was hanging on Xiaoqing's body, Yiya, and Xiao Bao's 2 little tails. There was also a little girl zombie named Xiao Hua by Xiao Bao because she especially liked flowery dresses. There was also Xiao Yu, who liked to live in people's chests. In fact, it was very irrational to bring 2 zombies out. However, as soon as her son went out, the 2 zombies followed him out like little tails. Xiaoqing had no choice but to bring them out. Because she didn't think about mutated plants before, she just ran out to escape. Xiaoqing didn't even think about where to find the mutated plants she needed. Currently, she had all kinds of plants except for the healing type. She didn't want to find any more healing type plants. She was going to look for pure attack type plants. It didn't matter if she couldn't find any. Anyway, she came out to relax. Well, escape. Before leaving, Xiaoqing told Gu Panpan to look around Jiang City to see if there was a suitable place to plant. Then, she could plant some crops. It wasn't small like her own vegetable field, but the kind that could feed a lot of people. Anyway, there were so many zombies as free labor. It would be a waste not to use them. This was Xiaoqing's last escape route. If the situation outside was really unimaginably bad, she would bring her friends in first. She would save some food and so on, just in case. After the apocalypse, both the land and the water were polluted by zombie poison. Almost all the plants had mutated. Except for some special places where there was pure soil, there were no normal plants to be found. Just like what they ate, the fruits and vegetables grown in the base were all mutated. After instructing Gu Pan, Shao Qing ran away. Yan Hanqing didn't feel sad because of this. Instead, he was very calm. He could see that Shao Qing still cared about him. Otherwise, she wouldn't have run away. It didn't matter. She needed time to accept it, and he also needed time to relax. As long as he persevered, there was no corner that he couldn't find. Shao Qing held Xiao Bao's hand, and Xiao Bao held Xiao Hua's hand. Xiao Yu was lying on Er Dai's neck. Yan Qiua on the right was escorting them. It was like a big family trip. After leaving the base, they realized that Rivertown was too peaceful. Other than the occasional disturbance from 2 or 3 of their kind, there was no movement at all. The outside world was now filled with zombies attacking everywhere. After zombies reached level 5, they would start to have special abilities, just like superpowers. For example, Xiaohua's atomization was one of her special abilities. These special abilities couldn't be seen at the beginning. As zombies evolved, they gradually revealed their special abilities. For example, some low-level zombies could control zombies of their own kind. They were usually spiritual-type zombies. There were also some more common types of strength and speed. After zombies evolved, they wouldn't be able to control natural elements as nimbly as human superpowered people. They also had the special abilities of natural elements, but they were often different from human beings. For example, zombies with wind abilities could be used to increase their speed. They could also fly for a short period of time. Another example was Xiao Bao. He was born with the ability to devour. When he reached level 5, he would evolve again. By then, he might be able to release his devouring ability. Chapter 490. Level 5 zombies could control their own kind and form a zombie tide. Shao Qing walked along the way and found many small bases that had been attacked by zombies. Yan Qiua explained to Shao Qing while walking, "I gathered the information and found that the bases that were attacked, whether they had the chance to evacuate or not, have all started to evacuate to the large bases. Currently, there are almost no small bases in the country. North of Yanjiang is controlled by a few large bases with Jingdu as the main one. South of Yanjiang, there are also a few large bases that have merged. However, after these small bases have merged with the large bases, they still need to be reorganized. I have a feeling that the real apocalypse is about to begin." Why was it that ambitious and ruthless people emerged in troubled times? Because troubled times could stimulate people's ambitions. Now was the troubled time of the apocalypse. Who didn't want to unify the apocalypse? Although Jingdu's status was high, it was nothing in the face of power. Shao Qing was very clear that because of the outbreak of the zombie tide, people were unprecedentedly united. The integration of the bases would be carried out very quickly. Some large bases might even be overtaken by the small bases. No matter what, in a short period of time, the forces in the country would gradually become obvious. When the zombie tide gradually weakened or ended, there would be no external forces, and it would become internal strife. This was very obvious, and there was no need to guess. Where there were people, there would be conflicts. However, Shao Qing didn't have to worry about this at all. Unless someone was kicked in the head by a mutant donkey, they would give up a good base and covet their zombie-occupied Jiang City. Because of the few zombies with them and the strict inspection of the base, they didn't rest in the base. Instead, they set up camp in the wild. In the afternoon, the tents were just set up. The children were playing in the tent. Xiaoqing was guarding the tent while Dai and Yan Qiue were in charge of looking for food. Xiaoqing heard a sound coming from the bushes. There were people in the bushes, and there was more than one. Someone popped his head out of the bushes and shouted in surprise, "It's a living person." Then, a group of people appeared. They were of different ages, and there were both men and women. They were probably refugees from a certain base. When they saw Xiaoqing, they quickly asked, "Sister, we think this place is relatively safe. We want to stay here for a night. We won't take up your space. Is that okay?" Xiaoqing nodded. This place didn't belong to her family. She couldn't just stop people from staying here. After getting Xiaoqing's permission, the group of people came over. They even had a car. Although it was an old three-wheeled motorcycle, there were several of them, which could carry a lot of people. The group of people looked like they were fleeing for their lives. However, a woman got out of the car. She was fair and tender, and looked quite outstanding. Her breasts were especially outstanding. She was very clear about her advantages. She was wearing a white shirt with a black jacket. Although the shirt was buttoned to the top, her breasts were bulging, which almost broke the shirt buttons. She looked more attractive than revealing her cleavage. The woman had a cigarette in her mouth. Her eyes were blurred and seductive. After getting out of the car, she looked at the ground with disgust. Then, she called in a sweet voice, "Run." A man came out and made an earth chair for her with his earth power. He even picked some leaves and put them on it. After that, the woman sat down and called in a sweet voice, "Brother Yao, get me some water to wash my face. It's dirty and dusty." Chapter 491. Another burly man sized her up and teased, "Can't you get out of the water by yourself? Why are you asking me for water? I don't have time now. I'll give you as much as you want tonight." "Stupid." The woman pouted coquettishly. She smoked while watching them set up the tents and tidy up the place. Occasionally, she would glance at Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing was very eye-catching, especially when she stood beside this group of dusty refugees. Her clothes were very simple, but they were very clean. Her hair was neatly tied up, and her entire person exuded a refreshing aura. Xiaoqing was the kind of person who was eye-catching and looked even better when you looked closely. Even though there was a charming woman sitting there, many people still stole glances at her. Xiaoqing was bored to death. She rested her chin on her hand and waited for Dai and Yan Qiue to come back. After waiting for a while, the group of refugees opposite had already set up the tents. Dai and Yan Qiue finally came back. Both of them had hunted small prey. After all, there were only a few people to eat. If they hunted large prey, it would not be easy to deal with them. After returning, Yan Qiue and Dai first looked at the group of refugees warily. Then, they came to Xiaoqing's side and asked, "Who are they?" Xiaoqing stretched lazily and said, "They're probably just passing by. Don't worry about them. Go and tidy up the things. I'm going to start cooking." When Yan Qiue and Dai came back, the charming woman's eyes could not move away. Dai's face was still a little childish. He looked like a delicate young man. Yan Qiue was much more mature. He was so beautiful that many women felt inferior. However, he also had a hint of evil, which made him look especially attractive. The woman did not hide it. She openly stared at Yan Qiue. Yan Qiue was too lazy to pay attention to her. She sat aside and tidied up the prey in her hands. Before they returned, they had already found a place with water. They skinned the prey that needed to be skinned and cleaned up the internal organs that needed to be cleaned. Now, they only needed to follow Xiaoqing's instructions and cut the prey into pieces. That was enough. Xiaoqing hadn't been idle before. She had found a lot of wild vegetables and fungi nearby. She opened up the belly of one of the pheasants and filled its empty belly with mushrooms. Then she put in some seasoning and chopped some scallions and ginger. She could cook it directly. After it was cooked, the soup was fresh and delicious. The mushrooms were smooth and tender, with the fragrance of the chicken. The chicken also tasted very good, with the fresh fragrance of the mushrooms. Among the other wild animals, the rabbit was braised by her, and the chicken was cut into pieces for stir-frying. Although chicken was not suitable for stir-frying, there was nothing to be picky about now. As soon as Xiaoqing started working, many people shifted their gazes to her. Some of them were drooling as they looked at the mutated animals that had turned into ingredients under her hands. Not everyone could be like Xiaoqing and the others, using mutated animals as food and hunting as they pleased. 9 out of 10 mutated animals had a certain degree of aggression. Ordinary people might not be able to beat a mutated pheasant. Moreover, although being bitten by a mutated animal wouldn't turn into a zombie, the smell of blood would attract zombies and other mutated animals. In short, mutated animals were not to be trifled with. Unless they had outstanding strength, few people could be like Xiaoqing and the others, eating wherever they went. If they wanted to eat wild animals, they could just hunt them directly. Those people just looked at them for a while and gave up. Those who dared to use mutated animals as food were at least paranormals. Moreover, the most precious thing in the apocalypse was food. It was even said that you could covet other people's women, but you couldn't covet other people's food. In the apocalypse, wives and children could be exchanged for food. Thus, it could be seen how important food was. Especially those paranormals, each of them had a strange temper. Maybe they would cause trouble if they looked at other people's food. Now, this group of refugees were all homeless. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were stray dogs. How dare they cause trouble? Although Xiaoqing didn't know what they were thinking, she was working hard to make the fire bigger. Her son must be hungry. She had to make the meal quickly. Then, the meal would be ready. As soon as the pot was opened, the fragrance immediately drifted out. Not to mention that these refugees were running for their lives. Even in normal times, they had never smelled such a fragrance before. It was the apocalypse, and they couldn't even fill their stomachs. How could they want to eat meat? Everyone tried to stretch their noses, as if they could breathe in the fragrance of the meat into their stomachs. When some people looked at the pot in Xiaoqing's hand, their eyes turned green, like hungry wolves. Xiaoqing called Yan Qiua over to taste it. It was ready, so she carried the food into the tent. She couldn't let the refugees see Xiaohua and the others, otherwise, they would be scared to death. Chapter 492. It was difficult for the refugees to fill their stomachs, let alone eat meat. They gnawed on the dry food in their hands, and then raised their noses and eyes to catch the aroma in the air. They looked at Xiaoqing's meat dishes. The charming woman looked at the hardtack in her hand, and then looked at the food in Xiaoqing's hand. She said coquettishly, "Run, Brother Yao, I want to eat meat too." The two men looked at each other. They really did not dare to leave the group to hunt. Otherwise, mutant animals and zombies would jump out of nowhere and eat them like desserts. After the apocalypse, there was no safe place in the wild. Unless one was strong, like Xiaoqing, the survival rate in the wild was very low. The two men looked at the charming woman with a troubled expression. The woman's face changed, and she snorted, "If I follow you two brothers, I won't even be able to eat meat. What am I after?" The two men hurriedly comforted the woman. The one called Brother Yao gave Run a look. The two men gathered together and discussed. Soon, Run walked towards Xiaoqing. Xiao Qing was putting the leftovers in the pot on a plate when she saw a burly man coming over. He said, "Sister, can we make a deal? I'll give you some nuclei to buy the food you order. Is that okay?" Xiao Qing had cooked a lot, and the few of them would not be able to finish it. Besides, helping others was also helping oneself. Who didn't ask for help? She nodded and took out a new plate, and gave some to the burly man. The burly man pointed at the nuclei in his hand and gave them to Xiao Qing. He and Brother Yao had saved these nuclei for a few months. They were going to add some new things when they settled down in the new base. Now, it was just a plate of food. Xiao Qing was quite generous, and gave him a plate full of food. Run thanked her and took the plate away. Xiao Qing cooked the porridge on a small fire, and opened another pot. There was rice in the pot, and it was already cooked. She scooped more rice and carried it into the tent. After Run brought the dishes back, the woman immediately picked up a piece of meat with her hand. The meat was delicious. She smacked her fingers and tugged at Run's sleeve. "Why is it chicken? I want to eat braised rabbit head." "They only have one rabbit head. They definitely won't sell it," Run said with a headache. The woman was immediately displeased. She glared at them and said, "Brother Yao, Run, I've suffered a lot ever since I followed you two brothers. I want to eat a braised rabbit head now." "You." Brother Yao quickly said, Okay. I'll think of something." In the post-apocalyptic world, the number of women had decreased drastically. For people like them, it was already considered lucky for their brothers to marry the same wife. Most of them were unable to find a girlfriend. His wife should be doted on. The chicken had already been moved, and he couldn't bring it back to let others exchange it. He touched his pocket and found the only crystal core left. He walked over. Xiao Qing just happened to come out of the tent because the chicken soup was ready at this time. Then, he saw another burly man coming over. Brother Yao was a little embarrassed as he grabbed a handful of nuclei and said, "It's like this. Can I exchange the braised rabbit head with you?" The burly man, who was more than 1.8 meters tall, blushed because of embarrassment. Xiao Qing suddenly thought of Yan Hanqing. When he was shy, his ears would turn red, and then it would spread to his cheeks. He was so cute. Xiao Qing quickly threw the thought out of her mind and nodded. Okay. Anyway, no one in her family ate a rabbit head. Otherwise, Yiya would be rolling on the ground. Brother Yao thanked her gratefully and went back with the rabbit head. Chapter 493. Xiao Qing took out the whole chicken from the pot. She opened the belly of the chicken and took out all the mushrooms mixed with the soup. This part was the most delicious. She added some chicken soup and scooped a bowl of it. She planned to serve it to the few in the tent later. Then, she tore the whole chicken into strips, threw it back into the pot, and extinguished the fire. After a while, it was ready to be eaten. The woman was jealous again. Ever since Dai and Yan Chiue came over, her eyes had not returned to normal. Why? They were both women, and her looks were not inferior to Xiao Qing's. Xiao Qing had 2 handsome men accompanying her, and those 2 men were very outstanding. They could hunt prey, while she only had 2 burly men who were not very capable. She looked at Xiao Qing and then looked at her. She had always been the one envied by others. She should be the one envied by others. But now, she could only envy others. Why? Jealousy had made the woman lose her mind. She looked at Xiao Qing not far away and gritted her teeth. She deliberately shouted, "I want to drink chicken soup again." Run and Brother Yao were really out of ideas. They had spent most of the crystal nuclei they had saved. They had to keep some for future preparations. If something happened in the future, they would not be penniless. Jiao, we don't have any more crystal nuclei. Run said helplessly. The woman's eyes turned red. She kept hitting Run. Why did I follow you two useless people? You can't even drink a bowl of chicken soup. I don't care. If you don't get it for me, I'll get it myself. Jiao, Jiao. Brother Yao shouted a few times, but he could not stop her. He hurried forward to pull her back. But the woman ran fast. At this moment, she was already in front of Xiao Qing's tent. She lifted the curtain of the tent. Before she could say anything, she saw an infant zombie turn its head from Erdai's neck and stare at her with a pair of black eyes. She was stunned. She immediately screamed and scrambled backward. Xiao Qing felt the veins on her forehead throbbing. When she was outside, she really didn't like trouble. When she encountered similar situations, if she could resolve it peacefully, she wouldn't mind letting others take advantage of her. Take the previous matter for example. Making things convenient for others was also making things convenient for oneself. However, when others came looking for her, she would not run away. Not liking trouble did not mean that she was afraid of it. On the contrary, she had been afraid of many things in her life, but she had never been afraid of trouble. The woman hurriedly ran out and grabbed Brother Yao's sleeve, then yelled with a frightened face, "There's a zombie in there." No. That woman must be the same. They are all zombies. The woman's voice was very loud. The refugees who were eating also became vigilant and each of them picked up simple weapons. Some of them were holding farming tools, some were holding steel pipes, some were holding kitchen knives, and some were holding wooden sticks. They were already frightened. Once they heard the word zombie, they would run away in fear. Xiao Qing lifted the curtain of the tent. Her eyes were full of tenderness. She looked at the woman and smiled. "Zombie. Where is it?" The woman was scared and shrank into Brother Yao's arms. She pointed behind Xiao Qing and yelled, "I saw it. An infant zombie. It's lying on that man's back." Xiao Qing had a smile on her face, but there was no warmth in her eyes. "Miss, are you so hungry that you're hallucinating? A zombie lying on a man's back. You've read too many ghost stories. You'd better go eat." Run and Brother Yao had interacted with Xiao Qing before. They felt that she was a good person, but they also felt that the woman was too unreasonable today. They tried to persuade her, "Yeah, Jiao, go eat. The food is getting cold." The woman pushed Run away and yelled, "There's really a zombie in there. Why would I lie to you? I saw it with my own eyes." As she spoke, she looked into Xiao Qing's cold eyes. She shivered and her voice weakened. Xiao Qing said to the two men, "You two keep an eye on your partners. My wife, child, and I are going to eat." Run and Brother Yao hurried to apologize. They blushed and said, "Jiao is not like this usually. We're really sorry. We're sorry to disturb you." The woman felt so wronged. She rushed over and tried to pull the curtain of the tent open, but Run and Brother Yao stopped her. If it were a normal day, she might just pretend that she didn't see it. Even if Xiao Qing was raising zombies, it was none of her business. However, she was blinded by jealousy today. All she could think of was to expose Xiao Qing's true face. It would be best if she could incite everyone to kill her. At that time, she broke away from Run and Brother Yao. The two men didn't want to use too much strength as they were afraid that they would hurt her. When she rushed over, Xiao Qing didn't stop her. If someone wanted to die, why would she stop her? The woman pulled down the curtain of the tent and said to the refugees, "Everyone, look. I'm not lying to you. There's a zombie in her tent." Dummy Air walked out. He deliberately turned his eyes into a scarlet color. Xiao Yu, who was lying on his neck, also stuck her head out. Xiao Hua was biting her finger. She smiled and showed her fangs. Little Bun, who had one black eye and one normal eye, immediately frightened the refugees. They almost knelt on the ground. Xiao Qing leaned against Dai's chest. She stretched out her grayish-black nails and lifted Dai's chin. She looked at the woman lazily and said, "What does it have to do with you whether it's a human or a zombie in my house? If you meddle in other people's business, your tongue will rot." Yan Chiyue was holding a bowl of chicken soup. She stretched her head lazily and said, "Sweetheart, come and eat after you're done." The power of jealousy was really scary. It made the woman overcome her fear. She incited everyone and said, "Look, they're zombies. Their whole family is zombies. Let's go and kill them together." No one moved. The refugees were still rational. People like Xiao Qing and the others didn't look like zombies except for a few places. At first glance, they knew that they were high-level zombies. How could they afford to offend them? Some of them even secretly scolded the woman for being a busybody. Xiao Qing and the others were hiding their identities. At first glance, they knew that they weren't going to do anything to the refugees. Why couldn't they just get along peacefully? They didn't have any powerful superpowered people in their group. How could they fight against Xiao Qing and the others? However, if they were exposed, would Xiao Qing continue to be peaceful? The woman was still instigating them. "What are you afraid of? We have more people. There's strength in numbers. How many zombies do they have? Don't be afraid. Let's go together and kill them." Chapter 494. Xiao Qing had become hot-tempered since the apocalypse, but she didn't want to kill people in front of her children. However, the woman in front of her had incited others to kill them. She couldn't tolerate it. Run and Brother Yao were smart. They quickly covered the woman's mouth when they saw Xiao Qing's expression change. They were embarrassed and wanted to apologize, but they didn't know what to say. The woman stepped on Run's foot, but Run gritted his teeth and didn't let go. Xiao Qing saw the pleading in Run's eyes. Finally, she chose to let the woman go. However, Xiao Qing still planted a daughter in the woman's body. If she did it again and still didn't change, Xiao Qing didn't mind killing her. In any case, Xiao Qing lacked everything except human lives. "Take care of your woman." Xiao Qing put down the curtain slowly. "Although I don't want to interfere with you, I won't tolerate it if you really annoy me." Brother Yao nodded and dragged the woman back. Xiao Qing entered the tent. She could still hear the woman's angry voice from afar. The woman had been spoiled to the point that she didn't even know what she was doing. If she continued like this, she would bring trouble to the two men. Xiao Qing was in a good mood today, so she didn't care about it. What if the woman offended another powerful man? This was the end of the world, a world where one could get used to stepping on bones. "This chicken soup is good. Do you want to drink more?" Yan Chiyue scooped a small bowl of chicken soup and handed it to Xiao Qing. Xiao Qing took it and fed it to Little Bun first. Little Fish and Little Flower were stretching their heads. They hadn't eaten such normal food since they became zombies. The two of them were very curious. Especially Little Flower. She was afraid of Xiao Qing at first because she had been beaten by Xiao Qing before. She almost lost her life. Later, she found that as long as she didn't do anything bad to Xiao Qing and Little Bun, Xiao Qing wouldn't beat her. She became bolder. For example, now she dared to ask for food in front of Xiao Qing. The two zombies that would scare people out of their wits were now lying on the edge of the table, waiting to be fed. They even looked a little cute. When the woman outside finally stopped, Xiao Qing had made the quilt and was ready to sleep. The next morning, when Xiaoqing got up, the group of refugees was nowhere to be seen. They probably ran away early in the morning. Being able to rest so close to Xiaoqing for a night had exhausted all their courage. Even though they knew that Xiaoqing wouldn't sneak in and eat them in the middle of the night, they were still scared and didn't dare to sleep. Xiaoqing didn't mind. She packed up her things and led her family in a random direction. Then, they started moving. She really didn't have a specific goal. She used looking for mutated plants as an excuse to travel. Of course, the most important thing was to avoid Yan Hanqing. If the zombies hadn't sneaked into the human base, she could have taken her family to a base and strolled around the market. Now, she had to stay as far away from the crowd as possible. After all, other than Yan Qiue, everyone in their nest was a zombie. People's luck was really important. After walking for a day, they just found a suitable place to set up camp. Xiaoqing heard someone call her, Sister Qing. Xiaoqing turned around and saw a familiar person pushing aside the grass. Her face was covered in dirt, but she still had a surprised expression. Then, a huge bear head popped out and looked at Xiaoqing blankly. Chapter 495. Qin Zishi. Xiaoqing was stunned for a moment, then she pulled him out and asked, "Why are you here?" "Sister Qing, long time no see. How have you been?" Qin Zishi was very enthusiastic. He didn't mind that Xiaoqing's identity as a zombie had been exposed at all. "We're going to the west coast." He hesitated for a moment, then said, "Here's the thing. Several countries in the earthquake zone have had serious earthquakes. Many high-level zombies have crossed the sea and come here. The higher-ups have sent people to form a team of superpowered people to patrol the coast and kill the zombies that come ashore. We're going to the coast." Xiaoqing nodded, then said, "I'm fine. Don't worry. Is the situation on the coast serious?" Qin Zishi frowned, then said, "The zombies that can cross the sea are not weak. There have been several level 5 zombies. At first, the casualties were quite serious, but now that we're prepared, it's much better." Xiaoqing asked, "Where are your teammates?" "They're all behind us. I'm here to explore." Qin Zishi touched Xiongda's head, then said, "I didn't expect to meet you. It's fate." Xiaoqing hesitated for a moment, then pointed to her tent and said, "I've brought a few companions with me this time. They're not human. If your teammates know about it, I'm afraid there will be a conflict, so I can't invite you to dinner. If you don't mind, you can come alone." Qin Zishi nodded, then said, "I'll ask my teammates to set up camp nearby. It's not too far away and we can take care of each other. I'll also restrain them from spying on us. Sister Qing, leave me a portion of dinner. I'll come over after I set up camp with my teammates." "Okay." Xiaoqing touched Qin Zishi's soft hair and touched Xiongda's head, then urged him, "Go ahead, I'll be ready soon." Qin Zishi took Xiongda back. After a while, a group of people began to set up camp not far from where Xiaoqing and the others were. Xiaoqing stood on her tiptoes to take a look. There were some familiar faces inside. Zhu Machan was also present, so she calmly made an extra portion of rice. Very quickly, Qin Zishi brought Zhu Machan over. Xiaoqing invited the two of them to come in and eat. When the two of them walked in, they were given a fright. Xiao Hua and Xiao Yu tilted their heads and stared at them with the same expression. Their eyes were so dark that they looked a little scary at first glance. Most of the people present were acquaintances, so the two of them were not afraid. They squeezed together with Air Dai and the others at the table and waited for dinner. While eating, Qin Zishi told Xiaoqing about the current situation in detail. Unlike the Celestial Empire, almost every household in America had guns. Therefore, in the early days of the apocalypse, the casualties there were much better than in the Celestial Empire. However, in the early days, there was a lot of conflict between superpowered people and ordinary people. In the early days, superpowered people were no match for guns. Many superpowered people died under the muzzle of guns after they clashed with ordinary people. In addition, the population there was not as high as in the Celestial Empire. The number of superpowered people was originally very small. In the middle and later period, when the zombies evolved to a certain extent, guns were useless. When superpowered people became the main force, the Celestial Empire realized that there were too few superpowered people. Therefore, the zombies there did not have superpowered people as their natural enemy, so they evolved very quickly. As far as they knew, some of the zombies that had crossed the sea had already come ashore. After all, when they first discovered the situation, many zombies had already arrived. There might be level 6 or level 7 zombies among them. The situation was not very good. Moreover, the zombies were still coming ashore in a steady stream. The capital had organized a lot of manpower, but the zombie tide here was also surging. If all the superpowered people were transferred to deal with the zombies that came across the sea, what would happen here? After all, there was not enough manpower. They could take care of this side, but they could not take care of the other side. Speaking of this, Qin Zishi also had a headache. In fact, we were not so short of manpower before, but when we cleaned up the zombies that came ashore, we lost many superpowered people. After all, most of the superpowered people are still at level 3. Level 4 is the high-end combat power, and there are only a few at level 5. The zombies that can cross the sea are all at level 4. Xiao Qing asked calmly, "Can you control them?" For the time being, yes. Qin Zishi rubbed his head and said, "If there is another zombie tide in the capital, we can't control this side." Xiao Qing was also aware of this. It could only be said that misfortunes never came alone. If the situation was really bad, she would not stand by and watch. After all, this was the country where she was born and raised. She could not be bullied by a group of foreign zombies. However, the people under her command were all zombies. If they were transferred to help, she was afraid that the people in the capital would raise their muzzles first. Xiao Qing did not want to be attacked from the front and the back. This matter needed to be considered in the long run. Anyway, the current situation was still under control. She was not in a hurry. She could follow them to see the situation and then decide what to do next. The only problem was that the zombies around her were too eye-catching, which was also a problem. At this point, Qin Zishi patted her chest and said, "Don't worry about that. Most of the team members I brought this time are from the Qin family's guards. Even if they find out about your identities, they won't make a fuss. Okay, I'll go with you to see the situation." Xiao Qing did not tell him her plan, but Qin Zishi was already very excited. Whether Xiao Qing was a human or a zombie, she was his friend and a master. If she was willing to go with them, she would definitely help. If Xiao Qing was willing to help, the casualties of his team would be greatly reduced, which was a good thing. As such, before they even finished eating, Qin Zishi was already anxious to go back and inform his team. In the end, he was stopped by Xiao Qing. "Let's finish eating first." Then, he and Zhu Machin were both given a large bowl of rice by Xiao Qing. After eating, he could not wait to go back and do some work for his team. Actually, there were only two things he wanted to say. First, there would be people going with them soon. Second, they should not be curious. Second, they should not casually investigate their identities. Then, even if they discovered something, they should pretend that they did not know or see anything. At that time, some of the team members started to jeer, "Boss, did you find us a sister-in-law? Why are you acting so mysterious?" Qin Zixi face turned red and he became angry. Didn't I tell you not to ask so many questions? Chapter 496. The more bashful Qin Zixi was, the more certain they were that their guess was correct. They kicked up a fuss and insisted that Qin Zixi bring the girl out for a look. The more people there were, the harder it was to stop. Qin Zixi's face was as red as blood. It was not because he was exposed, but because he kept thinking about how Little Bun had drugged him and tried to make him Little Bun's stepfather. Thinking about how Xiao Qing was called his wife, he could not help but blush and feel shy. Don't talk nonsense. It won't be good if others hear it. She already has a child. Qin Zixi gritted his teeth. Someone immediately whistled. So it's really a girl. She already has a child. Boss, aren't you going to take responsibility? Aren't you too much of a scumbag? Qin Zixi was dumbfounded. He could not explain himself clearly. He stammered, "The child is not mine." Another team member added. He sighed and said, "Boss, I'm not trying to nag you. Although big sister-in-law had a child, since something has already happened between you two, you should take responsibility. You shouldn't be so irresponsible just because of big sister-in-law's past. Boss, you're still young and don't understand. It's better for women to be mature and know how to dote on others." They started to laugh again. One after another, they teased Qin Zixi. Qin Zixi was about to dig a hole in the ground, but he still could not retort. At this moment, Xiao Qing walked over. She did not understand the situation and waved at Qin Zixi. Qin Zixi hurriedly ran over under the teasing gazes of the group. His face was still red as he said, "Sister Qin, why are you here?" "I'm here to give you something. You probably didn't get to eat such fresh fruit after rushing all the way here. I brought more, so I'll give you some. Take it back and share it with your brothers. They're all your team members. You have to feel sorry for them." Xiao Qing smiled and stuffed a bag into his hands. Then she said, "I'm not teaching you how to win people's hearts. It's just that most creatures like humans put themselves in other people's shoes. If you treat them well, they will naturally treat you well. This kind of kindness is not intentional. It's accumulated over time." "I understand, Sister Qing." Qin Zixi nodded seriously, and the redness on her face gradually faded. After they finished talking about business, Xiao Qing couldn't help but ask, "What were you talking about just now? I saw that your face was red." At the mention of this, Qin Zixi blushed again and stammered, "Nothing much, just some men's topics." Xiao Qing had always regarded him as a younger brother. Hearing his words, she sneered and touched his head. "You've grown up. You're a man now. Let's not talk about it. You should go back." "I'm going back to take care of the children." "Yes." Qin Zixi pursed her lips and looked at Xiao Qing's back. She suddenly felt that, being with Xiao Qing might not be so bad after all. Xiao Qing was a very good woman. When he thought of this, his cheeks inexplicably burned. Many things flashed through his mind, including Xiao Qing's smile, Xiao Qing's gentle eyes, Xiao Qing touching his head, and Xiao Qing, who was like a god of death. At that time, he even felt that Dai was so happy. Even if he became a zombie, there were still people who were willing to go against the whole world for him. Patting his cheeks and throwing away all the messy thoughts in his mind, Qin Zixi walked back with the fruit. His group of team members swarmed over, and one by one, they exclaimed in a tone of admiration, "God, sister-in-law is so beautiful." "That's right, such a charming, beautiful woman. She doesn't look like she has given birth at all. How did she fall in love with you, boss? Does sister-in-law like Jingtai?" Chapter 497. I'm so jealous of you, boss. My God, I haven't seen such a beautiful woman in a long time. After the apocalypse, most women would look haggard due to lack of nutrition, going through all kinds of hardships, and not having any cosmetics. Women like Xiao Qing were rare. Hearing their words, Qin Zishi felt inexplicably unhappy. He felt as if the precious treasures he possessed were being coveted by others. He deliberately tightened his face and took out the fruits that Xiao Qing had brought. Don't talk too much. Fruits were precious in the apocalypse. Ordinary people couldn't afford them. Some of them shut their mouths, and some muttered, "Sister-in-law is so nice." Boss, you're so lucky. Qin Zishi distributed the fruits and said seriously, "It's all because of sister-in-law. Don't talk nonsense. It won't be good if she hears." The team members immediately said nervously, "Boss, you haven't won her yet. She's such a good and generous girl. Hurry up and chase her. You'll regret it if you miss her." "Yeah, I think sister-in-law will have many admirers. There will be a lot of excellent men. Boss, you should be careful." "Yeah, what if someone gets to her first?" Qin Zishi still looked serious and dignified. "Eat your food. Put it down if you don't want to eat. Why are you so talkative?" The group of people hurriedly stopped talking and obediently ate their fruits. The next day, Qin Zishi said that he had invited Xiao Qing to travel with him. His team members were very welcoming. Firstly, it was a good thing to be able to see such a beautiful woman every day. Secondly, they hoped that Qin Zishi could cultivate a relationship with Xiao Qing and win her over when they traveled together. So, of course, they agreed happily. Qin Zishi also said that he hoped that they wouldn't investigate the people around Xiao Qing. No matter how strange they were, his team members still agreed. What a joke. If Qin Zishi broke up with Xiao Qing because of them, it would be a great loss. After Xiao Qing finished packing, she came over. The little bun was easier to deal with. Except for one strange eye, he didn't look like a zombie. After Little Flower reached level 5, he also had a special ability. He could disguise his eye color and other special parts. Other than not being able to speak, he looked quite normal. The most abnormal one was probably Xiaoyu. No matter how hard he tried to disguise himself, no one could tell that something was wrong. Xiao Qing was having a headache. Fortunately, Xiaoyu was also a high-level zombie. Even if she acted alone, she would not be in any danger. Therefore, after discussing with them, Xiao Qing asked Xiaoyu to hide nearby and follow them. Then, Xiao Qing held her son's hand in her left hand and her child bride's hand in her right. Two men followed behind her as they entered Qin Zishi's team. The group of people slowly walked towards the beach. Then, all of Qin Zishi's team members treated Xiao Qing very well for no reason. They even praised Qin Zishi in all kinds of vague words. They almost praised Qin Zishi to the heavens. Not to mention the others, even Qin Zishi himself was embarrassed. Xiao Qing was confused. What were they doing? Qin Zishi had an indescribable feeling of awkwardness and grievance. He could not say anything, especially when some people secretly told him to be careful. The two men behind Xiao Qing were not inferior to him in terms of looks. They told him not to let them get the upper hand. The group of people walked like this. Xiao Qing used a day's time to conquer everyone's stomachs with her cooking skills. Chapter 498. The first time they ate Xiao Qing's cooking, Qin Zishi's entire team, except for Zhu Machin who had already eaten, were all in awe. It was said that at night, the entire team lined up to hug Qin Zishi's thigh, telling him that he had to win over Xiao Qing no matter what. They all acknowledged this sister-in-law. After the apocalypse, they had never eaten such good food again. If Qin Zishi could win over Xiaoqing, didn't that mean that they could eat as good as today every day? That would be a heavenly life. Xiaoqing didn't know about this. She and Er Dai picked a lot of wild fruits and gave them to Yan Qiue to identify. The poisonous ones were thrown away and the non-poisonous ones were left to eat. Tasting all kinds of fruits was also a kind of joy, especially when you were with the person you liked. The fruits were sour and sweet. When Yan Qiue tasted something sweet, he would silently take out a special medicinal powder and apply it on it, then give it to Xiaoqing. After applying the medicinal powder, Xiaoqing could taste the fruits and wouldn't vomit. When he tasted something sour, he would silently eat it. If he really couldn't eat it, he would spit it out or give it to Er Dai. After becoming a zombie, Er Dai stuck his tongue out for the first time. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't have much water in his body, he probably would have cried. Xiaoqing could only helplessly pat Er Dai's head in response to Yan Qiue's bad intentions. Er Dai rubbed against Xiaoqing's hand, feeling wronged. The next time Yan Qiue gave him a fruit, he would stupidly swallow it. The team members at the side gritted their teeth. They felt that their team leader was too useless. If this continued, someone else would beat them to it sooner or later. But even if the emperor wasn't worried, it was useless for the eunuchs to be worried. As a result, they became more and more attentive. During the lunch break, there would often be team members who would pick bunches of wild flowers or clear and sweet stream water to give to Xiaoqing. When they did, they would all say, "Team leader told us to give it to you." For example, every time they stopped to rest, they would clean up a place for Xiaoqing, lay a soft cloth on the floor, and let her sit down to rest. These small tasks were all fought over by a group of people. They were determined to let Xiaoqing feel how good it was to be treated as their sister-in-law. Qin Zishi was so embarrassed that she wanted to crawl into the ground and not come out. Xiaoqing only thought that Qin Zishi and the other team members were being enthusiastic, so she didn't think much of it. When she received the flowers, she said with a smile, "I'll give you an extra lunch for lunch." At noon, the wild boar that Er Dai had hunted came back. The huge mountain of meat became their lunch. They fried, boiled, roasted, and ate it in more than 10 ways. Everyone ate until their mouths were dripping with oil. Some people had tears in their eyes. Since the apocalypse, they had not eaten meat so happily. This feeling of eating meat until they were full was really good. They still wanted to eat meat like this, so they put their hopes on Qin Zishi. Qin Zishi, who was stared at by everyone with hopeful eyes, thought, "Damn it." Xiaoqing didn't understand, but Yan Qiue understood a lot. When they went to bed at night, he hugged Xiaoqing and snorted, flirting with flowers and grass, attracting bees and butterflies. "Tell me, how many more are there?" Xiaoqing was stupefied. "Are you talking about me?" Yan Qiue was very sad, but when he thought about it, he was a little happy. It was good that Xiaoqing didn't understand. If she didn't understand, she wouldn't respond. Although Xiaoqing was a little lazy, she was swift and decisive in many aspects, whether it was making decisions or taking actions. However, she was particularly slow in one aspect. That was the emotional aspect. She was like a snail, shrinking into its shell. You could either force the shell open or crawl in and wait for her to understand by herself. Maybe in the next life. Therefore, men like Yan Hanqing and Gu Chuan deserved to wait their whole lives for no response. Yan Hanqing, who had no idea that Yan Hanqing had already forced himself to confess, sneered and thought to himself. There were 2 types of men that he was least afraid of. One was like Yan Hanqing and Gu Chuan, who didn't know how to express themselves and only acted without saying anything. They were extremely silent. The other was like Qin Zishi, who was shy and couldn't say anything. There was no competition between these two types of men, so he wasn't afraid at all. The scary ones were people like him and Dai, who were unconscious and clingy. It was said that blessings didn't come in pairs, and misfortune didn't come singly. Yan Chiue had just found a potential love rival, and the next day, he encountered something that made him even more sullen. They packed up and were about to continue walking when a group of familiar faces appeared in front of them. It seemed like they had met on the same road. Qin Zixi team members quickly became alert. After all, they were in the wilderness, and no one knew what kind of people they would meet. Xiao Qing was helpless. She covered her face. She wanted to be a good person, but the heavens didn't let her. The people who had come were none other than the group of refugees that had separated from them not long ago. As expected, enemies often crossed paths. Chapter 499. The woman's eyes lit up. She hadn't given up yet. Run was ready to retreat as soon as he saw Xiao Qing. He wanted to protect Zhao, but Zhao wouldn't cooperate with him. She looked left and right, probably trying to see if Qin Zixi and Xiao Qing were in cahoots. After all, when they left, there weren't so many people around Xiao Qing, which meant that these people met Xiao Qing after they left. The baby zombie wasn't there, and the others were disguised as human beings. Maybe they didn't know the identities of Xiao Qing and the others. After all, who would be willing to travel with a group of zombies? Zhao felt that her chance had come. There were no powerful people in this group of refugees, so they didn't dare to fight against Xiao Qing. However, Qin Zixi and the others were all high-leveled superpowered people. They could definitely defeat Xiao Qing and the others. Thinking of that, Zhao's smile became more charming and sinister. She stepped forward and said in a strange voice, "Hey, we meet again." Xiao Qing glanced at her coldly. Except for Run and Yao, the rest of the refugees couldn't help but step back. "And then? What do you want to tell me?" Xiao Qing asked lightly. The woman's face was distorted. She pointed at Xiao Qing and said to Qin Zixi and the others, "You must not know that this woman and the people behind her are all zombies. I saw it with my own eyes." Qin Zixi face changed immediately. He couldn't help but look at Zhao with a murderous look. He knew that although he didn't care about Xiao Qing's identity, it didn't mean that everyone else didn't care. This woman actually told Xiao Qing's secret so casually. She must be up to no good. He sneered and said, "If Sister Qing was a zombie and you saw her, you wouldn't be able to live until now." Zhao was stunned, and the others echoed, "That's right. Is there something wrong with your brain? Whoever you say is a zombie is a zombie." "That's right. Do we know you?" They just casually rushed up and pointed at us. "Ahem, they said they were zombies. I think you're the one with bad intentions. If Sister Qing is really a zombie, do you think she would let you leave alive?" Zhao panicked and explained, "Those people behind me all saw it. If you don't believe me, you can ask them. It's because there are so many of us that she didn't dare to kill us." "Run, Brother Yao, tell me." She turned around and said with a ferocious expression. Some of the refugees wanted to say something, but they saw Little Flower turn his head and give them a strange smile. His sharp fangs shone with a cold light, as if they could easily tear their flesh and bones apart. Those who wanted to speak immediately shivered and lowered their heads, not daring to make a sound. Run tugged at Zhao's sleeve and said awkwardly, "I'm sorry. She's been acting weird these days. She's probably hallucinating because of the zombies. She's been calling everyone a zombie." Zhao slapped Run's face and said angrily, "Why did I follow a useless man like you? He didn't even dare to speak the truth. Brother Yao, tell me." "Stop it, Jiao." Brother Yao pulled Run over and was stunned. He should love his wife, but they weren't married yet. He couldn't risk his brother's life for a woman, especially one who didn't know what was good for her. How long are you going to make a scene? I'm making a scene. Jiao was so angry that her chest trembled. She turned around and looked at the refugees. A bunch of cowards. Cowards. You all know she's a zombie. The people behind her are also zombies. Why don't you dare to say it? Is it because she's strong and you're afraid of revenge? We have so many people. Jiao instigated. She looked like some evil cult. Chapter 500. Xiao Qing smiled faintly and asked Qin Zishi, "What do you want to eat tonight?" Qin Zishi thought for a while and said, "We'll eat whatever you cook. As for this woman, you don't need to worry about her. I'll deal with her for you." Xiao Qing didn't say anything more. She walked over with Dai and the others. When she passed by Jiao, she gave her a smile, which made Jiao so angry that she almost died. Qin Zishi gave the people around her a look. Immediately, two people came forward and dragged Jiao away. Jiao struggled and said, "Zombies don't have temperature or blood. Do you dare to prove yourself?" Yan Qiue, who had already walked a distance away, calmly bit her finger. The bright blood fell on her red lips, which looked very charming. Jiao still wanted to say something, but Qin Zishi's team members had already covered her mouth and dragged her away. Her eyes were full of fear and despair. At this moment, she realized that it would not end well to go against some people. For example, Xiao Qing. Run and Yao both knew that they would kill Jiao. Their eyes were full of reluctance and helplessness, especially Run. He tried to chase after Jiao, but was stopped by Yao. He couldn't let Run die for such a woman. Speaking of which, they had already done their best. They treated Jiao very well in daily life. It could be said that they would grant her every request. However, Jiao was spoiled, capricious, and easily lost her temper. Not only that, but she also almost dragged everyone to death because of her jealousy. They didn't want such a woman. When Jiao was killed, Xiao Qing silently controlled the daughter and crushed Jiao's heart. She had to make sure that Jiao was dead. Only when the threat was completely eliminated could she be at ease. They went out to find a lot of food and came back. When they came back, they saw the group of refugees sitting there stiffly. They didn't dare to leave. They were afraid that Xiao Qing would be dissatisfied and kill them all. Xiao Qing didn't care about them. She stewed a big pot of rice and fried a dozen dishes. The group of people gathered together to eat. As they ate, one of the team members said, "That woman is really crazy. Look at Sister Qing. Who has ever seen a zombie that can talk, is so beautiful, can cook, and can eat normal food?" Xiao Qing smiled and said softly, "Brat, you're still praising me in a roundabout way. Your mouth is quite sweet." That team member hurriedly said, "Then you have to bribe Sister Qing. If you have a sister as beautiful as you, no, half as beautiful as you, remember to introduce her to me. You think you can buy me over with just one or two sweet words?" Xiao Qing said lazily, "Am I that cheap?" "That won't do." That team member said seriously, "I'll give you my captain." "That's enough, right? Sister Qing, just give me a girl when the time comes." Xiao Qing smiled and lay in Dai's arms. She almost rolled. She stretched out her arm and Yan Qiue reached out to pull her. Xiao Qing pinched Yan Qiue's finger. There was still a trace of blood on the scabbed wound. She stuck out her pink tongue and licked it. Then she said lazily, "See? These two are both mine. Don't say such things. Otherwise, my two will be jealous. Qin Zishi pinched his chopsticks. He didn't know why, but he suddenly felt a little sad. He bit his lower lip and smiled. Sister Qin, when did you get together with brother Yu? Why didn't you invite me to the wedding? We're not married yet. After a few days, when things calm down, maybe I'll hold a wedding and marry both of them. Xiao Qing said with a smile. Chapter 501. She hadn't sensed Qin Zishi's feelings before. After all, Qin Zishi was old. It was too much for an old cow to eat young grass. She still had some integrity. Until just now, when the team member brought it up, she vaguely sensed it. Her intuition made her immediately mention the two at home to put an end to all their thoughts. How should she put it? She felt that Qin Zishi had a good impression of her at most. After all, Qin Zishi was at the age where love was first awakened. It was easy for him to have a kind of infatuation with a mature and attractive woman like her. Therefore, it was better to deal with the pain quickly. It was better to let him give up. They were suitable to be brother and sister, not lovers. When the time comes, I will definitely give Sister Qing a big red packet. Qin Zishi curled his lips, but it made people feel that he was actually not happy. The few team members who were laughing and joking just now were instantly silenced. Especially the one who was joking with Xiao Qing. He was directly dumbfounded. He was prepared to help his boss, but in the end, sob, it was different from what he thought. He would definitely be beaten tonight. Okay, let's eat first. I will definitely inform you when the time comes. Xiao Qing didn't want to talk about this anymore. Because she knew that Yan Qiue wanted to marry her very much, but she kept delaying the time because of Air Dai. This was very unfair to Yan Qiue. If Yan Qiue didn't talk about it, she didn't want to talk about it and make Yan Qiue unhappy. The group of refugees ate with fear, let alone sleep. The next day, when Xiao Qing lazily got up to wash up, she found the group of refugees huddled together and sleeping under a tree. There was dew on their eyebrows and temples, and they looked very pitiful. When Xiao Qing walked over, they sat up vigilantly, each more alert than the other. Xiao Qing asked Brother Yao, because he seemed to be more rational, "Where are you going?" "We are going to find a bigger base to settle down. We found a few, but they all refused to accept us. So we are going to the capital," Brother Yao said honestly. Because of the zombies that had sneaked in before, those bases had become like birds that were startled by the mere twang of a bow. They would rather not add new people than accept outsiders. Xiao Qing nodded with some regret. If they were going to pass by Jiangxing City, she wanted to entrust Xiaoyu to them so that they could help send her back. However, thinking about it, it was impossible. These people were so timid. If he asked them to send Xiaoyu, they would probably be scared to death. After giving up on this tempting idea, Xiao Qing went to the bushes. Xiaoyu hugged the tree trunk and spat out bubbles as he slept. He really looked like a small fish. After feeding Xiaoyu some food, Lin Yiqian patted his head and comforted him. She then returned to her room with her toiletries. Once again, they parted ways with this group of refugees. They ran faster than anyone else, probably because they were afraid that Xiao Qing would regret her decision and want to keep them here to silence them. Xiao Qing was really too lazy to move them. Although zombies were inconvenient in many ways, there were also benefits. For example, zombies wouldn't feel uncomfortable for a few days every month. Relatives like menstruation would definitely not come. In the past, Xiao Qing had been in all kinds of environments to carry out missions. She used to lie in the bushes that were covered with cold rainwater for an entire day. She used to hide in the river during winter. Most of the time, she was in the wild and had to drink cold water. Every time her menstruation came, it would be very painful. Chapter 502. After becoming a zombie, saying goodbye to her period had become a privilege. However, her habit made her feel warm every few days, and she even wanted to be carried away. Especially after being exposed in front of Qin Zishi and the others, Xiao Qing threw caution to the wind. Dai carried her on his back and Yan Qiue held her in his arms. Even little Bun was biting his fingers. Wasn't this how he should be treated? In the end, Xiongde replaced Dai and Yan Qiue. Xiongde became Xiao Qing's exclusive mount. He carried Xiao Qing on his back and had little Bun and Xiao Hua on his head. Other than encountering those refugees, they didn't encounter anything special. However, they still saw many refugees fleeing in all directions, dragging their families with them as they tried to find a place to stay. The apocalypse had just settled down, but now it was chaotic again. Xiao Qing was a little tired. If she had a choice, she really wanted to stay in Jiang City and not go anywhere else. She wanted to see her children, tease her lover, and spend time with her friends. However, what did people live for? Others didn't know, but Xiao Qing knew that in addition to the safety of her family, she only had one wish, which was to live with a clear conscience. That was enough. Her conscience didn't allow her to see such a tragic scene. Otherwise, she wouldn't have intervened. To put it bluntly, if the whole world was destroyed and only a few of them were left, what was the point of living? Soon, they arrived at their destination, the West Coast. From afar, they could see many paranormals forming teams of about 10 people patrolling along the coast. Once they found zombies coming ashore, they would call the other teams and rush up together. There were many tents a little farther from the sea. According to Qin Zishi, these patrol teams took turns to rest. It was guaranteed that there were people patrolling 24 hours a day, every minute and every second. Therefore, the night shift people were catching up on sleep in the tents. As soon as they arrived at the West Coast, before they could contact the person in charge, they heard someone shouting, "Zombies are coming ashore." A row of resting paranormals immediately jumped up and rushed to the place where the sound came from. In addition to the patrolling team members, there were also some relatively strong paranormals, like a fire brigade. Wherever there was a need, wherever there was a zombie, that was where there was a need. When the fighting was more frequent, everyone would be so tired that they would immediately lie down and rest after the fighting stopped. Even if someone helped them up, they would turn into a pile of soft mud. No matter what, Xiao Qing still respected these people. At the very least, they protected the entire Celestial Empire. No matter what their intentions were, whether it was to protect their families or to fulfill their duties, at least they deserved respect for what they did. Xiao Qing saw that they were all rushing to the same place, so she said, "There's no hurry to contact the person in charge. Let's go and see what level the smuggled zombies are at first." Qin Zishi nodded and said, "It's not convenient for you to take care of your child. Don't get too close." He knew that Xiao Qing's babies must be zombies too. But even if he knew that Little Bun and Little Blossom were zombies, he couldn't help but want to protect them because of their cute appearance. "I know." Xiao Qing nodded, and a group of people followed the crowd. In addition to the superpowered people who were fighting, there were also some superpowered people who had healing powers. They formed a rescue team. Whenever a superpowered person was injured, they would be carried to the rescue team for treatment. Those who were carried down must be seriously injured, but there were degrees of injuries. Those who were seriously injured were directly carried to the tents in the distance. Those who were slightly less injured were treated and bandaged before they could go back to the battlefield. The superpowered people in the rescue team were mainly water and wood superpowered people, which were the easiest to heal. Xiao Qing glanced at them, then turned her eyes to the group of people who were fighting on the beach. Surrounded in the middle was a golden-haired zombie. It was very tall and looked quite strong. Half of its golden hair was missing, and its face was rotten as if it came out of a horror movie. It should be at level 4, so it was relatively easy to deal with. After judging its level, the people around were relieved and ordered the superpowered people to go forward and test it in an orderly manner. After the test, they should be able to take down the zombie with a wave of full-strength attacks. Xiao Qing stood far away. Looking at the zombie, she vaguely felt that something was wrong. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.